BC Cast Pod?
BC Podcast.
BC Podcast. Blank Check Podcast.
Wow, that was stupid.
That was great.
That was so dumb.
It was simple.
Yeah,
it was straightforward.
Oh my God, our microphones are all glowing at the tip.
Would you rather I call you Podcast Breath?
I was about to say that's what I would do.
That's the Griffin move, but this is too important of a movie to do something that's disrespectful to the film and to the medium of podcasting, the serious medium of podcasting.
Here's the thing about penis breath.
We're starting out great. Yeah.
Two things about it. One, my favorite thing about him saying penis breath, beyond the fact that it is such a specific insult.
Yeah, and I got four
just
things to say about
calling him a jerk or calling him an asshole. Or whatever, is that the mom cannot help but laugh because it's such a specific. Like she can't even chide it because she's clearly being like she goes penis breath.
It's a full laugh while she's attempting to scold him. Yep.
When I was a teenager, I met Chris Columbus.
Hey,
because my mom, I think, interviewed him for Harry Potter.
So he sailed the ocean blue. All the way over
it was
to
in
London.
It was in London.
Yeah.
And
That's kind of a good joke.
Yeah, it was a good joke. And maybe it was in her interview. This is all I remember is that the story was, it was right around when E.T. got revamped, right? It was for its
20th anniversary.
2002.
Right. Yep.
And someone asked him about it. He'd worked with Spielberg, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, what do you think of the fact that Spielberg made a couple tweaks and he's changed this thing with the, and he was like, as long as he hasn't changed the penis breath line.
And he did.
He did?
In the 20th version, they take out penis breath.
What?
I think it gets dubbed over with something else.
No.
The big changes in the 20th are penis breath, walkie-talkies removed, or walkie-talkies replaced guns digitally. No adults hold guns.
Oh, that's such an important detail.
Correct.
That's so dumb.
Spielberg highly regrets it, and we're going to talk about it.
This is what's fascinating. Versus all the other times we've talked about this kind of tinkering, Spielberg, within 1 year of it, was like, that was a mistake. Pulled the 20th version from circulation, and now it's hard to watch that, which is why it's hard for us to...
It's out of circulation.
Recount. Yes, you have to get the out-of-print DVD. And then he did the fucking CGI ET. There's one scene where there's a holistic CGI ET, and then he did a lot of face replacements and bits, and all of that sucks.
The penis breath thing, Griff, I don't think that's true.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I think you may have read that in this Ain't It Cool News article from 2001, but it's not true.
Okay,
the only dialogue that's changed, she doesn't say terrorist. She says something else. Like,
in a post 9/11 world.
Because it was post 9/11, the off-screen dialogue of her saying to Michael, right?
Yes.
You're not going out dressed like a terrorist gets changed to like pirate or something. I don't know, like something like less offensive.
Here's
not offensive.
My favorite thing about penis breath.
Sensitive.
Here's my favorite thing about penis breath. And obviously, none of us were alive in 1982. We can't speak to what it was like to be on the schoolyards in the immediate release of this movie. I like that it feels like an insult exclusive to this film.
Right.
You do not
it's an ET only insult.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm like, it's astounding that it isn't even quoted more. Every time he says it and I'm waiting for it, it still hits me right because it's surprising.
Well,
penis breath.
It was nothing like that penis breath. Welcome to Blank Checks. I almost said special features because I'm the one who introduces that stuff.
BC Podcast.
Welcome.
BC Podcast.
Yeah, see, the whole thing is Griff's like, let's do this intro where Ben does ET, but Griffin has a good ET.
Yeah.
Do ET.
Griff, you're a professional voice actor.
Okay, so you repeat the part. You do
off.
the Elliot.
BC Cast Pod.
No, we're not doing it again. Griffin, do the
podcast. Blank Check Podcast.
Do the ride. Right? Doesn't the ET ride, doesn't he say like your name at the end of it or whatever?
Goodbye, David.
Right. And you're like, whoa, he said my name.
Ben.
What can he do, Griffin?
AKA producer Ben. AKA the Ben-ducer.
What if we loaded every Ben nickname into ET? I feel like his Griffin's a little funky. I've obviously done the ride many times. It's my favorite ride.
It's your favorite ride?
I think it is. I think it's my favorite.
It's called
ET
ride. Adventure?
It rules. And we'll talk about it on Patreon.
Yeah, I think we'll put
I feel
Spielberg.
like it's always a little like,
goodbye, Griffin.
Do they like have one person? It's not like a computer program that figures out how to say name. They just have one person read like 1,000 names.
This is what's great about it. is the ride I want to say it's still sponsored by AT&T.
Sure.
It's AT or T. You have to choose now.
You do have to
course.
choose. You still
And
have to choose now.
10 comedy points, a decade of dreams. Way to throw back to an all-time moment on the show. If I remember correctly, the system is still, and the last time I went on it was like 2 years ago, you get handed a phone card while you wait online, and then right before you board the ride, you hand that phone card to an operator. You tell them your name. They type your name into a computer, and they link it to knowing which number ride vehicle you're in, so it will time out properly. But it is still a pretty fucking manual system.
But that is, it's kind of an old-fashioned way of doing it. Right?
Yes.
I guess, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
This looks very fun, this ride.
David,
I'm watching it.
we'll talk about
but
it.
it looks like very chill.
Yes.
Not too intense.
Look,
right.
We've talked about the scuttled blank check goes to Orlando plans over the years. Who knows if it ever happens? I have always felt like if we could make it happen, this is the ride where you would walk off and be like, Griffin,
enchanting.
I get where you're coming from. Not that you would be fully theme park pilled, but I think you would have a Forky-esque wall comes down. I get it.
It's one of the few rides that has actually stuck with me.
Wow.
It is enchanting. It is relaxing. It is.
Well, I like relaxing. I like hearing that.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating combination of the first half of the ride is you basically going through E.T. the movie as a ride.
And then you're like on his planet or something.
Then the second half of the ride is basically Spielberg being like, these are the things I developed when Universal begged me to make a sequel.
Right.
And I decided it was better to leave the movie as is. But you know what? I'll let them write a sequel novel and I'll put it in the ride.
Yeah.
And you go to E.T.'s planet with a bunch of guys,
Love
a bunch
guys.
of weird plant guys who are like playing instruments on their belly and doing stuff. And then he says, your motherfucking name, which rules, because I'm going to say it. E.T. is the greatest friend of all time. I hurt my voice a little doing the voice. I have to take a sip. Pow, I just shit my pants. This is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion products they want. And sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce, baby. Sometimes they fly in front of the moon and into film history.
E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial is the film today.
I am going to put forward a few hot takes.
Oh, boy.
Here's my first one.
Okay.
I think this movie is good.
Okay, that's not a hot take at all. That's widely held.
Okay.
Opinion.
Second, and this is a hot take, I think this is one of the most successful movies of all time. Financial, just speaking financially,
That's just
it's a take.
Matter
It's a take.
of data.
And third, I think this is one of the most important movies in history. Just kind of in like cultural, kind of omnipresent. These are hot takes. I don't want anyone to cancel me for this. I'm very excited to be talking about E.T.
I see what you're
It's a mini-series on the films of Steven Spielberg.
Yes.
We've been calling it Podrasic Cast.
Okay.
Today we've gotten to what I think is his best film.
I think it's sort of inarguably his. I have AI above it as a personal favorite. I think E.T. is.
Do you have it at
his
2?
opus, yes.
I mean, AI and E.T. are very paired, in my opinion. Ben, can you grab me a seltzer? This voice is going to keep catching up with me. I think Empire of the Sun and E.T. are very linked. I think Catch Me If You Can and E.T. are very linked.
Sure.
I think because it deals with so many of the core themes, he has other movies that are like adjacent to E.T. that I could understand people ranking above or below. But I'm like, this is the cleanest example of everything that makes Steven Spielberg. And I feel like it is this like incredible apex point of everything coming to a head.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, look. Yeah, I mean it's E.T. This is always going to be a tough episode. It's you know, it's easy to go into superlatives because there's really no way to over superlative E.T.
Yeah.
And its success is undeniable, and it's the best.
Talking about his blank check status. Watch the trailer for this movie. That very wisely hides E.T. In all of the trailers for the movie, all you saw was his hands and the glowing finger at the very end.
Yeah.
Silhouette of the hand. I feel like you don't even see silhouette of the rest of his body. So like seeing E.T. was a surprise, was kept off the poster. The main poster image at the time was the two fingers touching, right? This is how the trailer opens. In 1975, he brought you Jaws.
Yeah.
In 1977, he brought you Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Let's not pay attention to what happened in 1979. In 1981, he brought you Raiders of the Lost Ark. In 1982, he brings you E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial.
Why not?
If you're sitting in the theater and you see that trailer, you're like, great, you're promising me one of the greatest movies ever made. You're promising me the fucking pinnacle of Hollywood filmmaking. And this movie, like, delivered. Right? There's, like, a confidence to that pitch that it is incredible it met, and also met in a way where the weird contradiction of E.T. is, like, this is his small personal movie.
Yes, it is. And it is undeniably smaller in scale than
it's
the
a
films
very
he'd been making.
Intimate film, and if you actually recount it, like 5 things happen in this movie.
Sure. And nonetheless, it's an epic. It's sort of a little epic, as I think he put it. Like
a mini
sort of,
epic.
Yes. And it has real sweep
Which
to it.
Look, obviously, a lot of that is John Williams, who we will talk about. A lot of that is just the emotion this film is able to tap into makes it feel operatic, when it is actually very contained and focused. And watching it today, it is just like astounding. As much as I still feel like E.T. is one of the movies that probably gets repeated in like the offices of studio execs all the time of wouldn't it be great to make something like E.T., this thing would not pass one notes round. This thing would not survive. You just cannot imagine them not feeling the need to explain everything, add bigger set pieces, blow it up, heighten the stakes, you know?
Sure. I think there could be... What I think the movie is missing, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, is Barb. I'm going to bring her in.
You want Barb from Stranger Things?
Stranger Things is one of those like totemic shows that invented everything that happens in it, right?
Of course.
It's like the tone, the vibes, the aesthetic, right? Like
and
the
then
setting.
the Duffer Brothers went back in time after they created Stranger Things, whispered in Spielberg.
E.T., right?
Yeah.
Farted E.T. into Spielberg's ear.
Yeah.
So you watch E.T. now and you're like, okay, well, obviously Stranger Things did it better, but then you're just watching E.T. and like, if only Barb was here, you know?
Look, I have famously...
You're being facetious, right?
I am being facetious.
Okay, I just wanted to really crystallize that point.
I love to occasionally
throw in
bring
a
up Barb because
Yeah.
I've never made it past like episode 3 of Stranger Things. I tried 3 times because that show was so popular.
A second of it.
You know, trying to be like, this show is so popular. I'm sure I would, and I always. So I've tried 3 times. So I've watched Barb,
just the Barb,
poor forgotten Barb.
Yeah.
This like very early character who dies.
Yeah.
I've watched her die 3 times.
Barb looms very large for you.
And then just been like, I can't be bothered, and just not tried with episode 4.
When you said Barb, I was
Barb.
like, do you want E.T. to go to Vista Del Mar? What are you implying?
Well,
there's a
E.T.
new Barb
could
in
hook up
town.
with Barb and Star.
Barb and
Wait,
Star
that would
and
be
E.T.
so cute.
You know what rocks?
Go to Vista Del Mar. Barb and Star?
Go to Vista Del Mar.
That movie rules.
Such
It's
a good
the
movie.
best.
Yeah, here's another movie that rules. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial
we have
from
to even talk about
1982.
it. Yes,
I have
we do.
so fucking much to say. I hope people are hooting and hollering at a guestless episode because we're going to fucking expound on this thing. We had 2 great guests who were possibly hovering around it, but the whole time, every time we talked about it, we kept circling back to, and by the way, if we do E.T. guestless, that's all right. That feels kind of ideal.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
yeah,
there
for
were 2
sure.
people kind of sniffing around, and we were like, if it works, it works. But you know what? I'm down to just lay out and talk E.T., the boys.
Here we are.
Mhm.
When did you first see E.T. the Extraterrestrial?
Great
Griffin
question.
Newman.
I cannot carbon date it. It was young. It was early. I feel like it was presented to me as if it were like the Grand Canyon.
Same.
Like you are finally ready to understand a thing that is like key to our culture. But also, I think what is still so specific about E.T. is it is presented to children as this rite of passage of like, are you finally ready to go through a profound emotional
Can you
experience?
handle the sort of more intense emotions of this big feelings
Yes.
movie? Yes.
My guess is I saw it around 5, if not younger. But like, I couldn't tell you.
I couldn't either.
I remember very viscerally the experience of watching it for the first time and the emotional journey of it. And yet I can't pin what age it was because it's hard for me to think about a time before I had seen it.
I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I do just every time I watch E.T.
Yes.
realize how written into my brain it is of
Yeah.
just like Elliot's little shark toy. Things like this, where
Putting
I'm
it on
just,
his tongue.
yeah, like all right, the image of the blood on his finger. Things where I'm just like, all these things made such an impact
Yes.
on me at a young age, and they are so like when I see them, it's almost like freaky deja vu,
Mhm.
like that I'm like remembering something that happened to me, just because the movie was so kind of like whatever, pounded into me.
Yeah.
What up, Ben?
I mean, same.
Yeah.
I saw it very young. I don't remember exactly when, but it's just been so, it's ingrained in me,
It really is.
And
we were all born after it came out. It's
Yes.
not like we even saw it, in theaters or whatever.
I remember the VHS tape having a little green corner at the bottom of the version I had that just like it always stuck out to me as seeing it on the shelf.
Okay.
And this also for sure implanted in my mind that I want to be abducted by an alien.
So E.T. is kind of a real pivot point movie for you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So
David, similar experience for you?
wanting to be abducted by an alien.
No. Watching E.T. for the first time.
That's what I just said.
Right.
Yeah, no. I
Okay.
don't remember. I don't
Yeah.
remember the first time I
I'll
saw
say this
it.
though, like it all implanted in my brain, burned into me. It was not a movie I watched obsessively as a child. It was not a VHS we had. I remember this one very profound experience. And then my sister Romley, longtime sister, who's 9 years younger, when she was a couple years old, and it was like, is Romley ready for E.T.? We rented it for her, and I feel like I had possibly not seen it since the one time at that point. Romley had a phase where she was obsessed with it, and I feel like I watched it 5 times with her.
Sure.
When she was like, 4 and I was like 13. And then we took Romley on the Universal ride. She got terrified because she didn't like actually meeting E.T.
There's no way that he knew how to say her name.
It was bad. Yeah. It like activated some satanic chant in E.T. and he started talking backwards. No, and we were like, Romley, stop crying. He's going to say your name. And then he goes like, goodbye. I will post it on social media, but afterwards at Universal next to the gift shop, they have a photo op where you can get on the bike and ride in front of the moon with E.T. And we were like, don't you want a photo with E.T.? And Romley stopped crying for 5 seconds in order to do a perfect child model smiling face pose. We got the picture and then she got off and started bawling again. The photo's incredible.
Yeah.
But so I watched it a lot in that period.
Sure.
And then I've seen it, I want to say 2 or 3 times since then. They re-released it in IMAX a couple years ago. I remember going to a free public park screening.
E.T.
Probably 10 years ago. That was weirdly the 20th version. Projected off a DVD where everyone 5 minutes in was like, oh fuck, CGI.
Right.
But it is a movie.
Jabba the Hutt was there.
Jabba was there. E.T. stepped on his tail.
Yeah.
And then
Very
Jabba stepped on
realistically.
E.T.'s neck.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it is a very important film to me, despite it not really being one of my movies.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but this E.T. is, right. To me, not a movie I'd want to watch all the time.
Do you think you outgrow it a little bit?
I don't think
No.
so.
Because I definitely remember
Well, yeah,
having
when
it
you're
in
like
my
a teenager.
collection, and
Sure.
at some point, and I watched it a lot because I didn't have a lot of VHS
Yeah.
tapes
Okay,
growing
you
up.
owned
Sure.
it. You
I
had
owned it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at some point, I was like, "That's baby stuff."
Of course, when you're a teenager, you swing away, but then you swing back.
Let's
Well,
Also-
no, I hadn't swung back until today.
Oh, wow.
Because
And
I swung back.
I mean, well, I was
Ben
destroyed.
was pretty wracked.
Destroyed.
Ben was
Right.
pretty wrecked.
I can only imagine. I think. Look, I've talked about this a lot. Romilly being almost a decade younger than me basically insulated me from needing to swing away from any
Yeah,
childish
well,
stuff.
That's why.
Because I was just like, oh, I'll take her to every animated movie.
That's why you're the man in front of us today.
Right, exactly. And obviously my love of the craft of fucking puppets and animation, whatever, I still wanted to watch these things clinically as my adult brain was developing, but that made it okay for me to see everything.
E.T.
I do think, I just want to call this out. I think also culturally, we were of a generation where there was this kind of you go through a phase where you think Spielberg is a corny, manipulative bullshit artist.
100%.
And that was a cultural thing of people love Spielberg as kids, then they get cynical about him if you get serious about movies, and then you maybe swing back. Now Spielberg is sort of like such an old master.
Yeah, he's like a guardian of cinema now. It's not the same.
And he's also mostly making adult dramas.
Yeah, he makes original movies too, so people are just like, oh, what, it used to be like, Spielberg, he's, playing to the middle of the pack.
Right, now he feels like someone that like film Twitter protects more than the general public does and reveres,
Yeah.
But I do think that was like a thing of like, you're in the 90s and people are like, is E.T. like corny bullshit?
No,
it's not. It is. I just think it's like one of the most emotionally astute movies ever made. I'm going to say a lot of hyperbolic things in this episode.
You need to relax. I need you to relax because we're going to go too crazy.
It's so fucking good.
Yeah, it's very, very good. Steven Spielberg's E.T. I'm going to just open the dossier just to kind of like put a saucer under the cup.
Mm-hmm.
Kathleen Kennedy. A person who everyone has normal feelings about.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to say when people like to complain about the things she has done in charge of Lucasfilm and go like, who is this woman anyway? Why'd she get this position? I'm like, I don't know. She
what
fucking
successes she had?
She produced E.T.?
He met her.
What the fuck are you talking about?
While working on 1941.
Yes. She was John Milius' secretary.
She was working for John Milius, and so she starts working for Steven Spielberg. She's an assistant producer, on Raiders, and an associate producer on Poltergeist. And while he's working on Raiders, Spielberg is like, while I was doing all this Close Encounters research, I found out about this UFO case in Kentucky. Go find out about it.
Yeah.
She goes and digs into it. There's a case where a family said they've been visited from creatures from outer space. It's called the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. It's a very famous UFOlogy thing. Family of 12 that all said sort of like these gray aliens, hypnotized us. It's a classic. The Return of this Secaucus 7 has just come out, and Spielberg hires John Sayles off of that to basically like dramatize this.
And this is the kind of fabled lost project Night Skies.
Correct. It's basically a horror thriller kind of movie about like families coming under attack by aliens, and Spielberg is like thinking about making this piece. Like, what if like 20 years from now someone makes this movie and it's about, you throw cups of water on them in baseball.
It's just one of these fascinating things.
It's funny that Shyamalan, the heir to Spielberg at that moment, makes Signs, which is Night Skies.
Yes,
like,
it is.
with Shyamalan's themes answered.
Great point. It's just fascinating to me that this movie kind of comes from 3 different streams of like thought incubation, but all 3 start with Spielberg. Like, he's not intercepting anything from the outside, right? Like, there's this one impulse while still making Close Encounters that is like, what if I made a really scary alien movie?
Yeah.
Rather than the spiritual one. Then the second thread is while he's shooting Close Encounters and they are filming the stuff from the end of the movie where the aliens come out of the ship and there's the one main Carlo Rambaldi animatronic alien who is the one who does the hand signals and really interacts with Richard Dreyfuss. He has this like thought of, what if this was like a student exchange program? What if Richard Dreyfuss gets on the ship and the alien stays behind? What happens if there's one alien on Earth? And he's thinking about that in like a Disney movie vein.
And is it a coincidence maybe that movie was almost kind of anti-family a little bit?
We'll talk about it.
Okay, look. John Sayles delivers the script.
Okay.
Spielberg is just kind of like, this is like violent. I don't want this.
Too scary,
like,
and also, is this different enough from Close Encounters? Do I need to do this?
Yeah. And he's reading the script. One of the last images in the script is a little alien left alone looking at the sky. And Spielberg's like, well, that's interesting. And so throughout making Raiders, he's pondering this, and he's trying to get back to the tranquility, he says, the spirituality of Close Encounters. He's kind of lonely. His girlfriend at the time, Kathleen Carey, is in California. So is George Lucas. Harrison Ford is pooping his guts out all the time. And Spielberg's like, I wish I'd like had a friend to talk to, because it's been the days before he could just fire up Twitter and fire off some sexy posts.
Twitter's a great place for friends.
Exactly, connect to the world in a really healthy way. No, he's bored.
Yeah,
and he's like, what if I were 10 years old again and I had like an imaginary friend? I feel like it's been turned into there's this kind of apocryphal, like Spielberg had an imaginary alien friend as a child.
No.
I think that is not true.
No, I think it's about
more
him going back to the idea
summoning
of an imaginary
that
friend.
feeling. Exactly.
Right. And what is like, why do children do that? What is this like need to create a thing to fill a void? You know, a sense of like loneliness that needs to be replaced with like an imaginary loyalty. You know, because it's like kids with friends have imaginary friends. It's not just like a thing of latchkey children who don't know how to socialize. But I think it's the notion of that like connectivity.
Right.
I have an imaginary friend who is always going to be there for me.
Right. That
I can call on at any moment. That's what he's riffing on, not a specific imaginary friend of his childhood with a glowy finger.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's pondering all of this, and he's thinking, of course, about his father being gone, and you know, when he was a young man, and that's how he comes up with Elliot and this kid whose dad is flown off to Mexico with another woman.
Well, but here's the other part of this. The third stream is during Close Encounters, which he wrote, of course, he's like writing another script, or at least noodling with the early stages of it, being like, maybe I write all of my movies. And it is his first attempt to try to make the thing that he kicks the can on for 40 years that eventually becomes The Fabelmans, right?
Yeah.
It's the first attempt at being like, do I want to make a movie about divorce? Maybe not a literal autobiographical film about my family, but I want to like excise the emotions of divorce and being a child of divorce. And like at many points over the next couple decades, every time he sort of toys with it, he goes, too hot to handle.
Sure.
What he gets into is the idea of, can I fold these three things together?
Yeah. So he's got the sales draft. He's like, forget it. But he brings in Melissa Matheson.
Yes.
Who had written the Black Stallion 1975 and 1979 Black Stallion.
Is on set during Raiders.
Because she is dating Mr. Harrison Ford.
Correct.
She's one of the only people he's around there to talk to.
Yes. She's written the Black Stallion, which he loves. She's written The Escape Artist, which was a notoriously kind of tragic and difficult production. And, Francis Ford Coppola's son dies during the making of that filming, that film, whatever. It's a complicated movie, right?
Sure.
The point is, he starts talking to her about, like, I'm noodling with these ideas. There's the sales draft I have. There's this other thing I'm interested in, whatever it is. Melissa Matheson's like, I'm retired. I don't want to write anymore. But he keeps sort of talking through it to him until she finally sort of locks in. What, David?
Let me read the dossier.
I watched so much special feature stuff last night. Don't give me that look.
I just feel like, why do we even have the dossier then?
Because it's great.
Okay. Well, she said
JJ phone.
She's not into science fiction. She doesn't feel like a good writer. She didn't like Black Stallion. Spielberg says he admired Black Stallion, which feels a little more couched in. But she was feeling very unhappy and miserable about herself. She'd optioned a book for some screenplay that she couldn't finish. Whatever. They all lean on her. Kennedy, Harrison Ford, Spielberg all lean on her. She writes a draft, and she writes a screenplay called E.T. and Me. Then it's called A Boy's Life. She consults with Harrison Ford's young sons, Willard and Benjamin.
Good names.
Sure.
Willard Ford.
And she says that multiple kids that she talks to, basically with this proposal of like, what would you do if you had an imaginary sort of alien friend? Bring up the healing, taking the owies away, right?
Interesting. Okay.
And so she locks into that. It's like, okay, that can be what's sort of magical about him.
Yeah.
The other thing is that Harrison Ford's boys are obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And she's like, okay, so I think like I'm going to have them playing Dungeons and Dragons, have this sort of like seed the rich imaginative stuff there. I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
Phone home, Melissa's line.
Okay.
Spielberg's joke was, Melissa, are you working for me or AT&T? And she said, to quote Ben Hosley, it's AT or T, and you have to choose now.
Yeah, funny. But also, wait a second. Ben plagiarized that joke?
But
a decade of lies?
She's Spielberg then has lunch with Kathleen Kennedy. Walks in with the screenplay. Kathleen Kennedy's meeting with someone at MGM, I think. And he's just like, we could shoot this draft. It's the first draft, and he's like, we could shoot this tomorrow.
He says
it's
it
the
is
best
still,
first draft I've ever read.
Still to this day, the best first draft he's ever read.
Right.
Kathleen Kennedy said, at that point in time, I'd maybe read 5 scripts.
Right. But Spielberg said, like, people would read it and cry.
Correct.
Like, it's, you know, which is not usual for a screenplay.
No, and Kathleen Kennedy was like, look, I didn't have enough perspective to understand how good the script was, but I knew it was great. And she's like, now, in the last 40 years, I've read thousands of scripts, and nothing's as good as that first draft of E.T. The other part of it is that Spielberg had been stewing on all the pieces of this for so long that he's basically, during Raiders, like going to her and being like, can I share some more thoughts with you? So like the writing process is like, and I think it extends past when Raiders wraps, them meeting and spending days where he is just spilling notions and ideas to her. And then she's doing things like talking to Ford's sons and going, what about this? What about this? And they're like meeting on it. They're talking through it a lot before she goes off, writes, comes back, hands him a perfect thing. And they're like, they probably adjusted less than 10% of what's in that draft.
This lady's hanging with Steven Spielberg, writing E.T. and sleeping with Harrison Ford.
I mean, it's
what the
kind
heck?
of the dream.
It's pretty good stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Although I think being in love with Harrison Ford, especially back then, is kind of a tricky thing.
Sure,
He's
but
kind of a grump.
Ben
you know?
put the right focus on it, which is she is getting to sleep with him. That's pretty
sure.
cool.
Sure,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes. Yes. But so it makes sense that this thing sort of like comes together so quickly because it had been in him so long. She knew how to process it well. She was pulling from other places. When she finally sits down to write, it had all sort of been figured out. But I also think it is a key part of this movie for how much Spielberg didn't really want to talk about his childhood at length until later in life. But everyone knew that the divorce was seismic. I think people used to read this movie as being a lot more like one-to-one autobiographical, where when you watch this film now, you're like, the circumstances of his childhood do not line up very well to this movie. It is speaking to a feeling, it is speaking to an emotional truth, but there is like not a ton of overlap here. And I think if Spielberg had tried to write this himself, it would never have even gotten close to being as good as her being able to process it and with a little distance form an actual story around it.
This isn't.
It isn't.
It's not a. Yeah, this is the. Just because he's inspired by his, you know, his childhood, you know, search for a father figure and all that, and that's in the movie. It's right. It's not like some 1-to-1 movie about Spielberg's childhood at all.
No, which is what I find fascinating. And it's a thing I'm going to just pin on the board right here in our conversation that I was thinking a lot about on this most recent watch. What is E.T. about?
I have plenty of answers.
I
for
have
you on
plenty of
that.
answers for you too, but I think part of the movie's power is that it actually is a little hard to pin down. That it is a little bit of like a mirror. And I think why this movie is so effective is I think it is about certain very specific things, but I think it is about them in a way that leaves enough room for everyone to like fill in the pieces of it. This is my take. We'll get into it.
I'm not
You
sure
disagree.
I agree with that. Yes, I think E.T. is a very universal and powerful feeling that children have, which is why
I agree. That's what I
everyone
think
on
it's
Earth
speaking
connects
to.
to it.
That's
Yes.
what it's speaking to. Yes.
Well, Rick Baker had been brought in to, I guess, design a bunch of monster aliens for Night Skies, and was basically told, like, this is now a children's film and you have to design one alien.
Yeah. Was really upset
so he
by
got
this.
really mad.
Yeah.
And exits the project.
You wasted my time.
Spielberg turns to Stan Winston, another icon.
Yeah.
And Stan Winston likes the script, but then he also checks in with Carlo Rambaldi,
who, of course, did the animatronic for
the big
Close
monkey,
Encounters.
for King Kong, and he did do the little alien in Close Encounters,
The one
who obviously
kind of hero alien
is only on screen for 10 seconds or
Yes.
whatever.
But Carlo Rambaldi comes from fucking Dario Argento movies.
Is it rude to say he looks like E.T.?
It is not. I had the exact same thoughts.
He's a very funny looking guy.
People always talk about that, like Spielberg, like, you know, throughout, like, I want him to look a little like Einstein.
Yeah, that it's like he has Einstein's eyes.
I want the intelligence and I want the kindness in this.
Bo Derek.
And then I was just, well, yeah, he's got Bo Derek's rockin' bod. He's a
Wait.
perfect 10.
Oh my God.
Doesn't he
Carlo
kinda look
Rambaldi
like
looks a
E.T.?
lot like E.T.
Even his Wikipedia photo in the background, blurred out,
Yes.
is E.T.
But
And
it's-
it's like, you're like,
Brother.
look at this side by side.
Even the shape of his head kind of tracks triangulates. He's got these very rich, big but wide set eyes, and then the kind of like small pointiness of his mouth and his nose.
Oh my God, that's so funny, guys.
Right?
Yeah.
And you look at him and there's a same kind of like odd, elusive, hard to pin down quality where you're like, this guy looks a little scary, a little intense, kind, emotionally like deep, you know? It's
Yeah.
all there.
So Rambaldi, Spielberg decides he wants both. Stan Winston doesn't want to collaborate, so Spielberg just goes with Rambaldi. Stan Winston apparently intensely regretted that decision. No shit, obviously. And he's, gives him this really great sort of suggestion of like, basically like, I want him to be off-putting, but not monstrous, which is kind of a tough needle to thread. And if the E.T. design is bad, this movie stinks.
I agree.
It's would be really hard to overcome if you have like Mac and Me, like, instead of E.T., right? The Mac and Me.
Absolutely.
Alien. Like if you just have a stupid looking thing.
And what's wild is like, Rambaldi comes from like someone who did giallo movies, right? The year before this, he does Possession.
Great movie.
The creature stuff that he
actually designed Isabella Gianni. People don't know that she's a Carlo Rambaldi animatronic.
Correct. And that's the root of her recent like legal tax issues is like puppets shouldn't be filing taxes. She doesn't
have tax
know.
issues?
Yeah, I think she went to jail for a bit, possibly.
If you're French, and you're a famous actor, and then you get older, something weird happens.
It is.
I don't know what it is.
It is wild.
It's like a radioactive Half-Life thing where it's like, oh, time's up. You're about to get weird in some way or another.
Right. Is the biggest talent agency in France Monkey Paw Incorporated?
No, isn't the biggest talent agency the great guys from 10%? My favorite Netflix show?
Yes.
I know it's not, it's probably, what's that show called? Call My Agent is right.
Yes.
I love that show.
Yeah, what about my Monkey Paw joke?
That was good.
It does feel like the fame catches up with all of them in a weird way.
But have you ever watched Call My Agent?
Yeah.
So my mom was like, watch this show. I think I was like,
you might be surprised to hear that my mom was like, watch this show.
And I fire it up with her.
Yeah.
It was like I was on vacation with her or something, and we were trying to decide on something to watch. It was a nightmare, and she was like, watch this, let's watch this. And like immediately they're hitting you with like Cécile de France jokes, right?
Yeah.
Of like, and I'm like, this is so great. This is like inside baseball about French acting.
It's so funny.
Anyway.
What I was going to say is that Possession designs are not that different from E.T.
Interesting.
There is that sort of like fleshy, gooey, lumpy, brown, sort of like bioorganic body horror thing to
right.
E.T.
And it's just give it nice eyes.
Yes.
And
give
more
it
of a kind of
and
old
personality.
man vibes.
The Possession ones are fully terrifying, but it is what you're talking about, that line of like, there should be something a little off-putting for him, in him. What will make him feel real is the idea that the audience has to kind of like learn to love him and warm up to him and start to see a personality in him, rather than all other movies like this design something that at first blush is cute, right? Like they don't trust that they can get you there through performance and story. They're like, well, if he looks cute, it's easy to get people in. To invoke a movie we've covered in the past, Decade of Dreams, when David Fincher was doing his casting process for Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and all of Hollywood's hottest actresses were coming in and desperately vying.
And E.T. did audition for that.
He did. And by the way, he had a good take.
He had a good take, sure.
He had a good take. He always said,
I'm hacking. Yes.
The problem was he would see people like Scarlett Johansson, who he was like, had a great performance, nailed the accent, had the characterization, and was like, it is kind of impossible to not make Scarlett Johansson sexy. And we could like put the piercings or the wigs on her, and it always still was like fighting that. And he said to Sony, I need Lisbeth to be like E.T. And they said, what do you mean? And he said, I want it to be so if you see her on a poster, it feels a little bracing. And I trust that in the movie, you will warm up to it. And he said, like, E.T., if you see him as like a plush doll on a shelf, you're like, that thing is hideous looking. But if you've seen the movie, you connect to the design.
So he comes up with the ET design. It's a really good one.
Yeah, he nailed it. It's fucking incredible. Beyond the design, it is just, I texted this in BC group text Max Plus, our major all hands on deck group text.
Sure.
As JJ was like completing the dossier. And I said, like, does E.T. give the greatest performance in the history of film?
He's a cool guy.
It is astonishing what they get out of, like, obviously a real mishmash of mediums.
Right. animatronics, puppets, guy in suit.
Yes, but I think the thing in the E.T. puppet that I struggle to think of another example of it being done this effectively isn't just like, oh, there's an expressiveness to him. This puppet feels like it breathes. There are motors in it that are like micro expressions that are going on and moments in the film that are not trying to sell an emotion. They are selling the idea that he just exists. There's always this kind of just sort of like flexing of his face.
Right. I agree. I think E.T.'s cool. I do think he's right on the edge of looking completely fucked up and terrifying, which is why he's cool. I like when he gets drunk. I like when he puts on flannel. I like when he crushes some beers. We'll talk about it.
Can I do a quick ranking of my 5 favorite comedians of all time? Number 1, Steve Martin. Number 2, Drunk E.T. Number 3, E.T. as a ghost for Halloween.
Yeah.
Number 4, E.T. wearing lady clothes. Number 5, Bernie Mac. These are 3 of the funniest
I ain't
bits in
scared of you motherfuckers.
history. Yeah, I love it when E.T. says that.
Spielberg has a script.
Yeah.
Spielberg has a little clay prototype of what E.T. looks like. He goes to Columbia, where Night Skies was set up, and they'd made Close Encounters. And they're like, this is going to cost $10 million. That seems like a lot. Your last movie was 1941 because Raiders hasn't come out yet. That didn't do well.
And let's remember that Columbia really
have a movie called Starman that we really like.
Right. I love when our podcast has gone on long enough that stories start to overlap in things we've covered in the past, like this web of shit. But Columbia really wanted a Close Encounter sequel, which is why he makes the director's cut to sort of satiate that need. But when he comes to them with Night Skies, I think they're like, look, this feels close enough to Close Encounters, even if it's not literally a sequel. We'll take what we can get. By the moment he comes in with a fucking clay maquette and is like, it's now about like a nice alien who befriends a sad boy, I think they're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Sure.
And a thing I saw him talk about a lot in these special features I watched that span over decades is that he kept on being like, this is me trying to make a Disney movie. And in 1982 and 1981, Disney was at their nadir. They are bad.
It's
right?
not quite a brand that you can sell to people in the same way. It's a bit of an embarrassing brand.
It's embarrassing. He was like, it's uncool. Disney animation is in a bad place. Disney live action is in a worse place.
Like in 1982 or 1981 or whatever, you're talking, that's Fox and the Hound. Black Cauldron is 85. It's a new deal.
We're in a
the
black
Renaissance
hole.
is coming.
I mean, Tron comes out the same summer. They're trying to make Star Wars, right?
Users.
Yes. Or shitty family comedies. We both love Tron. The animation movies are like struggles behind the
Columbia puts this project in turnaround.
Yeah.
Spielberg goes over to Sid Sheinberg, his old mentor at Universal, and Sheinberg says, I love it, but I'm not sure it's going to be like a big commercial movie.
Yeah.
I'll give you distribution, but I want you to raise some money with a bonding company. Spielberg does that and signs a contract that has strict penalties where he would give up percentage points if he went over budget or anything like that.
He's trying to keep himself on rails.
Well, they're trying to keep him on rails as well. So he does it really sort of quickly and sort of conservatively, if that makes sense.
This movie was set up in the manner of a blank check project where everyone's like, look, the script is good. It's probably not commercial. He talks about how everyone working on it was like, this feels like a fun project, but I don't know if it's going to make any money. And his greatest wish was that it wouldn't lose Universal money. And Sheinberg just kind of took a flyer and like, look, we got a history. You've made some other hits for us.
There's also this Howard Kazagian who produced Raiders claims that Spielberg was trying to make a musical at Universal called Reel to Reel.
Okay.
Which he could not get them to agree to. And he still kind of owed Universal a movie and does E.T. as also. Like finally, he's like, well, let me just do E.T.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure how, grain of salt on that. I don't know how much we should take it as like Spielberg just getting something out of the way.
Universal buys E.T. from Columbia for $1 million.
$1 million.
And instead just puts all their chips onto Starman.
Columbia does, yes. Number one casting decision, Drew Barrymore. Bring her in. legendary child of the Barrymore acting family. Yes. She famously tells Steven Spielberg a story about how she's like the lead singer of a punk band.
Correct.
I'm not sure if that was like her like making something up or if it was like quote unquote real.
This is what he said, that she talked for minutes about how she had a punk band and they were going to go play at CBGBs and her friends at school.
Confident. She's 5 years old.
Right. And like 6 or 7 minutes in, he was like, this isn't real. Like the more details she added, the more he went from like, maybe
they
she's
were called
saying,
the Purple People Eaters.
Right. When she started out, he was like, I guess maybe she plays with friends at school. And she started heightening to a degree. But then his realization was, if she can sell me on this being a reality, this kid could sell me on anything.
I mean, it's the most delightful kid performance. It's incredible.
It is astounding.
Drew Barrymore is great. She was first interviewed for Poltergeist, obviously, to be little, what's her name? Carol?
Yeah. And Altered States is her first movie, is that right?
She had been in, I think she's very young.
She's very young.
Heather O'Rourke, Carol Ann Freeling.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, Elliot obviously is a much tougher decision.
Yes.
David.
Jack Fisk. Oh, no, what were you going to say?
David Hollander, I don't know who that is, had been cast, some kid from Little House on the Prairie.
Okay.
Is made to play D&D at Harrison Ford's house and was seen as too showy and assertive by Spielberg, so is uncast.
Well, let's get ahead of one thing here, right? And it speaks to like why the audition process included things like Drew Barrymore talking about being in a punk band. That Spielberg was like, for this to work, I need to like create an experience for this children where they are like feeling things honestly, and also are like taking some part in the authorship of this movie. So part of his thought, even though the script in his view is pretty perfect, is like the thing that will make this work is if the kids are really in this in an honest way, and we have to sort of adjust around them and find the right personalities and kids who have that level of imagination and emotional connection and all of that sort of stuff. So all the auditions are these weird tests to sort of like see the personalities of the children as much as anything else.
That makes sense to me. Like, yeah, because Henry Thomas reads, he's recommended, yes, by Jack Fisk, because he had played, say, Sissy Spacek's son in Raggedy Man. He reads, and the reading is not very good, but then Spielberg's like, well, why don't you do this improv?
It's part of what he said. He said he didn't seem comfortable with the language. You know, he wasn't good at learning lines. He does this improv that you can see that is...
It's a famous, you can watch it on
Have
YouTube.
you ever seen this, Ben?
I've not.
It is a callback where he just describes to him the situation where he's like, okay, so government men have shown up and they want to do experiments on E.T. and they're going to take him away from you. And E.T.'s getting sick. And you have this emotional connection to him and he's your best friend. And he's like, got it. And he's like, okay. And then they just start the improv and Henry Thomas like breaks into tears and does basically at the level of what you see in the final film, the emotional connection of like, you can't take E.T. away from me. And then it ends with him going, kid, you got the part.
Wow.
Yeah.
Say it. You can hear him say it.
It's like perfect. But he, in that moment, realizes like he's adjusting to all these kids of like, what's the way to direct this kid, right?
Yes.
What's the best way to get this performance out of them? I'm casting personalities, energies, emotions.
Corey Feldman is cast as a character called Lance, who is going to be Elliot's like nemesis, bully, whatever.
Sure.
Gets taken out of the screenplay.
Unnecessary.
Feldman, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Feldman is very depressed, but obviously that's what gets him the parts in Gremlins and the Goonies, which Spielberg produced. Peter Coyote walks in. Spielberg hates him, and then he puts some keys on his belt, and Spielberg's like, I love it!
Jingle, jangle.
Where'd you get those keys?
They talk a lot about how he shot this movie like basically in continuity because he wanted the kids to have the emotional experience of like this building in real time. And part of the big calculation, which I would argue paid off really well, is like when we get to the end of the movie, there will be an outpouring of emotion because these kids will genuinely be saying goodbye to the whole experience. And there's this great clip of Drew Barrymore where like at EPK, they ask her during filming, like, how has this experience been? And she just goes like, it's great because there are a lot of kids in this movie, and sometimes you work on other movies and there aren't other kids, so when you're not working, you don't have anyone to play with and it's lonely, but here they're kids all the time.
Right. They're playing
that was like the attitude he wanted to create. One of Melissa Matheson's side jobs on top of being like an associate producer on the movie and being there to help rewrite stuff was like she also had to spend time with the kids all the time. And like do activities with the kids when they weren't being schooled so that she could learn them and adjust to them and pull from what they were feeling and whatever. And Peter Coyote makes this comment on one of these things I watched. I think it was like a Q&A for the 20th anniversary release where he was like, yeah, the vibe on the set was great. I mean, I had just come off of 10 years of living on different communes. And I rolled onto the set and I was like, yeah, this feels like a commune. And I'm like, wait, we're not going to unpack that at all?
That's cool.
But
Good for you, Peter.
It does speak to his weird kind of earthy vibe.
Yeah, he's a real hippie guy because his birth name is like Robert Cohen.
Yeah.
And when he was in college, he like ate peyote and was like, I am Peter Coyote.
One of the coolest names.
It's a pretty cool name.
Yeah.
And he's like you can read all about him. He discovered Zen, hung out with the Beats, like was hanging out in Haight-Ashbury in the 60s and all that
Has
shit.
a Hall of Fame voice.
Yeah. Sounds cool.
And he sort of emerges from all of that and is like, I'll start acting again.
Right.
And he's a great actor. I love Peter Coyote. He's amazing in this movie. I think that we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Spielberg doesn't really storyboard this or plan it in the ways he'd been doing with like Raiders and all that stuff. Says he kind of winged it. I think it really helps the movie. Obviously,
but a lot of those,
feels
as
natural.
you said, like he needs to work around the kids. He can't impose structure around them. He said a thing I liked where he was like, Melissa Matheson did this thing that no other writer I worked with ever did, which is when we started filming, she had broken all the scenes onto cards. She had retyped scenes onto individual cards. So I had a stack of cards. And that freed me from needing to carry the script around. And every day I would take the couple of scenes we were shooting and just put the cards in my pocket and then just be able to focus on those scenes. You know, like take a card out, show the kids, be like, this is what we're filming today. And this takes place after what we filmed yesterday. And just really like zone into that reality.
Alan Davio shoots it. Obviously, he'd worked on Amblin with Spielberg. They hadn't worked together again.
Spielberg moves on to like much more established cinematographers. And then Davio says he heard the announcement of E.T. and sent Spielberg, I think, a TV movie he had shot recently.
You need me to read from the dossier.
Fucking read from the dossier.
Because that is not what it says in the dossier. We have to listen. Spielberg watched a TV movie called The Boy Who Drank Too Much, starring Scott Baio. But Spielberg watched it.
Okay.
And noticed Davio's names in the credits.
Yeah.
And called him immediately. And was like, you need to shoot my next feature. And Alan's like, why? And he's like, I just saw this thing on television and it knocked me out. Like, so very nice of him, but basically also kind of like, hey, it's my old buddy Alan.
It's one of his only movies.
And then he goes on to, of course, shoot Color Purple and Empire
he
of the Sun.
does this next run for the chunk of the 80s. It's one of his only movies not edited by Michael Kahn.
Yeah, which is crazy. Why isn't it?
I watched
Carol
some
Littleton,
long Kahn interview where I forget what it is, but he explained there was
I thought it sucked.
No, there was some scheduling conflict. It was the one time he was on something else because he thought Spielberg wasn't going to have a movie lined up. And I can't remember what he would have been doing at this time instead, but it doesn't seem like there was any animosity or weirdness behind it.
Carol Littleton, who edited it, is a pretty famous editor in her own right and also married to John Bailey, the very famous cinematographer. Fascinating Hollywood down-the-line tech power couple.
Yes.
Anyway, Spielberg starts shooting the movie. E.T. is sort of the big question. We have the look, but how do we, make it move around?
I'm sorry, it's Poltergeist. It's that Poltergeist and E.T. were going at the same time, obviously, that those two shoots basically went back to back, and he asked Kahn to oversee Poltergeist because he basically was like, I trust you, and I'll be hands-on with E.T. That's what it is.
So with E.T., they're like, he can't be a puppet like Yoda because that won't make sense in a realistic environment. It makes sense in a fantasy environment, like sort of hopping around. Yeah. So animatronics, Carlo Rambaldi wants to do animatronics, but Spielberg is like, he's not going to feel alive. So whatever, they split the difference by just doing a lot of different things, I think is the answer, right? They do have some animatronics. They do have some puppetry. They also have people in the suits.
You have a walk around E.T. You have like mimes who are doing just hand motions. You have an animatronic. You have puppets. You have all these different things. I think part of what is so astounding about like the success of E.T. as a performance for me is that they're very smart about like the design of E.T. is thoughtfully made in conjunction with what you're going to need to get out of him in a performance, right? Like the extending of the neck is sort of like, well, to put like a little person in a suit and have them waddle around is going to look silly. So better to give him like no feet and no legs. So it does just kind of like look like a lumpy shifting of weight, and you've pre-established that.
Yeah.
But also the neck can retract in, so you don't have this unwieldy thing when he's moving.
Well, but also
when it's planted animatronic, then he can get more
the
expressive.
neck makes it look like it's not a puppet or a person, because you're like, well, nothing could fit in that neck.
Exactly.
That's what's clever about the neck.
But that he has this form that can kind of contract when you need him to walk. It all rules.
Here's the truth. E.T.'s real. He's just a real alien. They found him. They
Thank
cast
God.
him. Okay, he's just real. And that's the answer.
That's the truth.
That's the actual truth. Carlo Rampaldi, you ever seen that guy? That's just E.T. in a human suit.
Yeah, he fucked E.T.'s mom.
You may or may not know that fucking M&Ms were the original in the script, but then Reese's Pieces came in. This is, and I'm not saying this to roast him, but I just know it about him because I've known JJ for years. JJ, our researcher.
Yeah.
It was literally the Reese's Pieces deal and the sort of rise of merchandising in movies and all that. It was literally his PhD dissertation topic. Yes.
It's one of those famous stories.
He wrote 230 pages about this.
M&M's being like, we don't fucking need you. We're M&M's. And then M&M's lost so much business and Reese's Pieces exploded.
But it's not just that Hershey's, who own Reese's Pieces, we're like, oh, we'll do it. They were like, we'll do it and we'll craft a marketing campaign around it. It'll be like
this is
holistic.
A chance to define ourselves.
And now that's what fucking American culture is.
Okay, here are things I have to say. One, the entire...
E.T.'s real.
This is what I'm building off of. The entire visual scheme of this movie is built around, hey, it might be smart if we try to lean on backlighting.
Yeah, it's yes.
It will make E.T. look more real. It will give him a tactility. It will not expose the sort of like seams of this puppet.
Yeah.
It does feel like that accidentally turns Spielberg on to what becomes his number one like visual preference.
It's also like, as a kid, I remember it really affecting me how like their house is often really dark.
Yes.
The shades are closed. And it just feels depressing in there. Not like oppressively so, but just a little gloomy. Like Elliot's room is kind of a gloomy mess. That first whole part where they're playing D&D underneath that kind of stained glass light in the big booth, which, by the way, what is their house? Their house is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And like, what is Dee Wallace's job? And how do they, I know it's in the valley and they're not like, it's not like they're like, it's a rich neighborhood, but like, I'm fascinated by this house.
Well, they're on the hill.
Yeah.
Like they're in this weird liminal space where they're like on the cliff, right on the edge of the perfect suburban housing community, but between that and the forest.
That's the thing. It feels like a new housing development.
Yeah. It's like out there.
It's very of the moment, but will be out of date in like a year.
Right. There's going to be more and more.
But you're correct that this like technical visual sort of like practical scheme ends up lending this emotional weight. And I also think he responds to that. And then when he starts working with Janusz, it becomes the cliche of the Spielberg like pools of light from the window shit.
It's so crazy that this film lost Best Picture to Gandhi. Yes. Obviously an error.
Yeah,
but one of those things where Gandhi was this big historical epic. The Oscar voting pool was much. How did it lose best cinematography to Gandhi?
Yeah.
I've seen Gandhi. Gandhi is very watchable. It's not a movie where you're like, wow, the cinematography is incredible.
It wins 4 Oscars. Does it win editing?
It won Best Original Score, which we should mention. John Williams wrote a pretty good score.
We'll get
into that. It won Best Sound and Sound Editing back when they had 2 sound Oscars, and it won Best Visual Effects. And I think it won maybe like a sort of special makeup Oscar or whatever. I don't.
But it is insane that it didn't win cinematography, editing, and I would say original screenplay. What wins original screenplay this year?
Best screenplay written directly for the screen goes to
Golden Pond?
Gandhi.
Well, I mean, Gandhi, like, is it like... Gandhi a small, little, cute, nice guy?
Has Gandhi ever brought
flowers
back to life?
Well, kind of. That is kind of his vibe.
Does Gandhi have like a visible rib cage at all times? Like, fuck, we keep backing into this.
I'm assuming neither of you have ever seen Richard Attenborough's Gandhi.
Little bald guy. Fuck.
It's just funny to think about. And it's also funny that like Spielberg clearly is an admirer of Richard Attenborough, puts him in Jurassic Park, likes, and like Richard Attenborough at the time was, graciously as the winner, it was like, I thought E.T. was a better movie. I think E.T. is like a miraculous movie.
Yeah. Neither of us have seen Gandhi.
Yeah.
Gandhi is very, very watchable.
I'm
It is one of those things where for one, Ben Kingsley is just fucking ridiculously good in it.
I'm going to throw out a hot take. I think he's a good actor.
He's a good actor, but it's a very straightforward, watchable, like, here is the life of Gandhi biopic that by the end kind of sweeps you up, and the funeral scene is crazy. Like, it's effective, but it wasn't even like a big hit. It was like a medium hit. It was a big hit, I guess, for a sort of big historical epic.
That's what's kind of weird about it to me is I have Gandhi in one of those Columbia Classic 4K cassettes. So I own it, and I still just am always like, I'll watch Gandhi at some point. But you could see there being theoretically a David versus Goliath narrative that I think, for example, really helped Hurt Locker against Avatar, right? Where similarly, I don't know why I broke that into two words, there is like, here's the highest grossing film of all time. Does it need Best Picture as well?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably part of it.
But yet, Gandhi was this kind of like classical Hollywood epic with big scale and all these extras and all these things you said. It's not like they gave it to ordinary people against E.T. Gandhi's kind of in a weird midpoint, you know?
It is. And it's like pretty good.
Can I finish this epic point I'm building here about E.T. being real?
E.T.'s real.
Backlighting, right? Second thing is Spielberg concocts a whole scheme, which is like, I want to hide the people operating E.T. at all times. They build these sets and everything around like, can we run cables into another room? If Drew Barrymore is interacting to E.T., I want her to feel like E.T. is real.
Right.
I think for the other actors, he's like, look, it will help their emotional reality. But Drew Barrymore in particular, he's like, she's at a crux age where she might just straight up believe this is an alien. And if we can get that out of her, that's kind of magical, right? Like, just let's make it as little acting required as possible. And he feels like it's working. Like, oh my God, we fucking done it. We hide the guys. We run cables through a hole in the wall to another room. We keep that door locked. She never sees them. Like, halfway through filming, she comes up to him one day and she's like, I have a secret. Can I show you? And he goes, sure. And she leads him by hand and opens the door to all the operators. And she's like, these are the guys who work ET.
Right.
And she's presenting it to him like she's figured something out.
Right.
And he realizes she's known.
Right.
And that for her, that's like part of the magic. And what she says now as an adult is, even if she couldn't put it in words, she understood that the emotion she was feeling from E.T. was a reflection of these people. Yeah. And that she didn't need to believe E.T. was real. That she was like, A, the craft of it, but B, like, this is being performed by people who are pushing emotion through this. And it helps me to see them as people.
Right.
So I know that kindness is real.
Right.
And like the other actors talk about it, where like he said he cast Dee Wallace because he felt like she had a childlike spirit. This movie doesn't show an adult in full until Peter Coyote's like full reveal, right? Is the whole visual scheme of like the keys on the belt.
Apart from Dee Wallace, yes.
That's the one. And he said the reason is because she's like a kid.
She's the only adult that they trust or have a connection with. It's the magic of the fact that the first time you see Peter Coyote's face is not that you're seeing his face, although it's a lovely face.
It's a lovely face.
And to be clear, I could do 10 more minutes of the keys. The keys get me going. The keys look good, jangling around.
Yeah, sound great.
You're seeing his face because he's making an emotional connection with Elliot. He's saying, I care about this too. I've always wanted to meet an alien since I was a kid. He's saying things that are finally getting through to Elliot.
Correct.
It moves me to tears. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about the first time you see that sweet hippie's face.
Do you give him a supporting actor nom for this?
I don't. That's an interesting, maybe I should.
You put Dee Wallace in lead?
Yeah, is that bullshit?
We went over
kind
this
of bullshit
in an episode that will come out in 2 months for our next miniseries.
I mean, I think I put her in lead because I wanted the people I have in supporting. I don't know.
Do you have Drew in supporting?
I do have Drew in supporting.
So that's the only argument I would kind of make for putting Dee Wallace in
exactly.
lead. You have Henry Thomas in lead?
Of course.
Right. Do you have him win?
No, I do not.
Who do you give it to in 82?
Paul Newman in The Verdict. I'm sorry. Leave me alone.
No,
it's one of my favorite screen performances
David, I think
of all
that's
time.
a great case.
As much as Henry Thomas is so fucking wonderful in this movie.
Yeah.
My supporting actors of 1982 are, this is a pretty good list.
Okay, give it to me.
Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner.
Great performance.
Sean Penn in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Great performance.
Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours. which is a supporting performance.
Yeah.
Nick Nolte is the lead of that movie.
Yeah.
By another 48 hours, they are co-leads.
I'll say this.
And he's the lead,
It's
basically.
more of a supporting performance than Kieran Culkin is in A Real Pain.
Sure. Who's probably won an Oscar by this point. Or no, this episode's coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
But he's probably going to win an Oscar.
Yeah.
Bill Murray in Tootsie.
Wow, that one's kind of interesting.
And Kevin Bacon in Diner, which is I love Kevin Bacon anyway, but is a dynamite supporting.
Sure,
like,
but that's
Star is
also
Born type performance.
A real David pick.
I mean, do I need to put Coyote in there? Yeah.
Maybe.
How about the keys?
The keys.
Best supporting keys. You
yes.
did give it. Yeah.
Right. Well, I gave it the honorary Golden Key Award, which I only give out in a year of great key film acting.
82,
obviously,
2003. Of course, we're all rushing towards the same joke. But he says this thing when he auditioned Dee Wallace. He was like, she's got this sort of like childlike thing to her, right? It is reflected in what you said, her laughing at penis breasts. She can't even contain it.
Yeah.
She's kind of on their level. There is this
It's funny because I
feeling-
mostly think of her as like a scream queen, right?
Yeah.
Like that's largely Dee
Cujo
Wallace's
and shit.
career, right? Yeah.
But he recognized this thing in her and that she's on their level from the beginning. This is a movie where the cameras are usually pretty fucking low to the ground. She's not too tall.
Yes.
He shoots this movie from the perspective of children and of E.T., who is also, let's say it, a short king.
And Israel.
In
Let's
Israel.
also say it. He's real.
Yes. But he was like, she feels like one of them. And it is what... Talking about this, the setup of this family not being one-to-one, but a thing that Spielberg, I think, is really connecting to is his mother, was not always the most adult person. And when his parents split up, he is the oldest.
He's taking care
With
of his
3
sisters.
younger siblings, there is a degree to which he is forced into a bit of a parent role.
Well, there's a degree to which he's the Michael. It's funny. It's like he's split across all the kids. Like Michael is the one who's kind of responsible for his siblings.
Yes.
But also is making fun of them. And Spielberg talks about how he make fun of his sisters.
Yes.
Elliot is this just emotional, like throbbing kind of emotional creature. Right, like his feelings are so on his sleeve,
But
who's
he's
so in need of a parent.
the
like,
middle child, which
figure.
is so different than Spielberg's identity, and he is so much younger than Spielberg was at the time of the divorce.
Yeah, he is. Spielberg was more of a teenager.
Right.
Dee Wallace to me does not strike me as a Spielberg's mom analog, really, because like she doesn't seem like this kind of floaty,
Well, this is
arty person. She mostly just seems busy.
it's the most Matheson magic of she's reinterpreting stuff in her own way, and then they're casting based on what she wrote rather than him trying to analog it to his own life.
I'm watching this with Forky, and like when she leaves Elliot home alone with a fever.
Yeah.
Elliot's 10.
Mhm.
We were kind of like, I mean, again, it's the single mom thing, right? Where it's like, these are latchkey kids. What can you do?
Yeah.
And we were like, 10, you could leave a kid home alone. It's a little borderline. But I was like, but with a fever, I would probably
Totally.
kind of feel weird about it. When she leaves Gertie alone
It's
at
kind
the
of
age of 5,
Yeah.
just to go around the corner to like get something, like you do have, you're like, damn, like that's a wild thing to do.
It's-
but again, the sort of latchkey kid thing.
It's
like,
very
right?
different
that's
from
the
what
life
we
they live.
know
What else
about
she's supposed to do?
his mom, but there is a similar. He said that one of the big things he insists on in the script is that they call her by her first name because that's something he and his siblings did to his mom.
So fucking annoying.
That they all call
My
her
daughter
Lily.
does that sometimes. It's so annoying. They know so early that it's annoying.
That's pretty funny. I give
It's
her some
very
comedy
fun. No,
points.
it's a good
Will
bit.
you relay some comedy points to her when you get home tonight? Just give her 5.
It's very
3.
interesting.
It's maybe
This
a
is
little
the first
dangerous
time-
to give a young child 5.
This is the first time I've watched this movie since I had a daughter, and it is my daughter's pretty close to Gertie
I was gonna
in like
say.
personality.
And age and
Yeah, I mean, Gertie's
even a
probably
little
5 or
bit
6.
of look. She's got some
Yeah.
Gertie
Oh, yeah.
vibes. Yeah.
And it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Dee Wallace thing is just like, right, her not being able to contain the laugh, them sort of treating her like one of the gang, right? She's not the same as Spielberg's mom, but there is this feeling of like her energy creates a need for Elliot to kind of step up and be the leader, which is more interesting because he is not the oldest child. And that Michael in some way is like a reflection of, I think, the bullies that Spielberg felt like he was sort of tormented with. And he talks about
that.
well,
Go on.
no. Just the analysis of like E.T. forces Michael to have to respect Elliot in an interesting way,
Yeah.
right?
But I still think of Michael as the protector. Elliot
He is.
E.T. That's like the whole weird phenomenon that happens.
Yes.
They become one being, and Michael is the only one who's really attuned to that. Michael is kind of the secret hero. Of
Michael
E.T.
is great. But
The scene where he goes and sits down with the toys,
yeah.
very quiet little scene. really gets me every time.
But the first 10 minutes of this movie are Michael and his friends,
Yeah, they're being
the headphones kid and fucking C. Thomas Howell.
Yeah.
For about 10 years there seemed like the biggest movie star out of the E.T. cast. It is funny to think.
Because he was in Soul Man?
Yeah, he got to star in movies. But that first chunk is like Elliot being ignored, them kind of gently ripping on him.
Yeah, but
right?
he's annoying. Elliot's
He is.
a bit of a whiner. He's younger than them, but he wants. It's a classic, younger sibling thing of like they just want to play D&D.
It's also what Spielberg
my
talks
turn, my
about,
turn,
his unhappy childhood, right? This feeling, not even based on circumstances of what happened with his parents, but just like he was a worried, sensitive,
Right.
lonely child. He just felt this way all the time.
Yeah, very feely boy, clearly. And, I think it's easy to get a little annoyed by Elliot at first,
Mhm.
just in that way of like, stop being such a little pain in the ass.
Stepped on the
Elliot.
pizza.
He
steps
did.
on the pizza.
It's not just that. It's that he then blows up the spot that they had gotten secret pizza.
That's like
You really feel for the kids being like, fuck.
it's an anti-save the cat moment. It's a moment that threatens to turn you against the
Ruins
character
the pizza.
forever. It's such a bold move to be like, everyone's going to be angry
Like
at
you
him.
can't play D&D without pizza too. It's pizza, D&D pizza.
And also, from their perspective, he comes back. They're like, where's the pizza? He's like, I stepped on it, but by the way, I found a goblin. You're like, excuse me. First of all, unforgivable crime. Second
Pizza's
of all,
dead.
that's your excuse?
Yeah, second of all, clearly you're not ready to play D&D because we just said the word goblin near you and you're like,
Right.
There's a goblin inside. There's a fucking goblin in our house. Oh, Elliot. He's such a cutie pie, though.
Dee Wallace on one of these 20th anniversary Q&A things, they're talking about Spielberg's whole strategy of making the kids not see the puppeteers and engage with E.T. as real. And then she interjects and she's like, I have to say I'm being thrown off every time one of you guys talk about him as a puppet because to me, E.T. is real. And even 20 years later, I feel that way. And it's like, that's why he fucking cast her.
Yeah.
Because there is a part of her that still cannot engage with E.T. as the adult at the time of the making of the movie being anything other than like another actor she worked with. Or not even an actor, a real thing she reacted to.
E.T. is real.
E.T. is real.
The film begins. We'll get to the release later. The film begins in the forest.
Well, it first just begins with the letters E.T. coming up.
True.
No like preamble, no Universal Pictures Presents, studio logo, and then just E.T. fading in, the Extra-Terrestrial fading in, and then the movie starting. It's a little like ominous, especially because the logo is the hand-drawn version, which otherwise we basically only see over his shoulder as he's like doodling E.T. in school and writing his name. But there's something kind of just like no preamble, no ramp up, title, cast, and then we're in the forest and we're seeing this very shadowy backlit thing of this admittedly very cool spaceship design.
It's a cool spaceship, round boy.
Looks like a
flower
Christmas
pot.
ornament.
I think
Flower
it looks like a
pot,
flower
interesting.
pot.
Sure.
Because they like flower. These are botanists. That's how I always took it, right? These aliens are botanists.
E.T. has said when people asked for like direction on the development visually of
E.T. has said this?
I'm sorry, Steven Spielberg.
Oh,
I was more excited to hear what E.T. had to
has
say.
said,
E.T. says,
I am botanist.
Griffin.
Spielberg said that when they asked him about like the sort of biology of E.T., that he would say to people like, I almost think E.T. is a plant.
He has like plant veins. I've heard
Yeah,
this too. Like
That
he's a
there's
plant inside.
Like maybe think of him less as an animal on his planet and more like a plant.
Love it.
Yes. But that makes sense with the flower pot version.
They're
of it.
studying, whatever.
You're
grass.
seeing a lot of ETs
But-
in this opening, but all in silhouette, all obstructed,
Yes.
all through trees.
Our E.T.
Yeah.
is kind of enchanted, I think, by the lights. That's why he misses his flight. He's like looking at the valley. He's looking at the houses.
It is
And he's thinking like one day the ultimate valley movie will be made. Magnolia.
the Wall-E
But until
thing
then, this is the ultimate valley.
that I love. And I feel like Wall-E is one of the only movies to kind of come close to touching ET magic at times.
I love Wall-E, but
I said
let's relax.
come close to touching it at times.
No.
I put so many fucking qualifiers on that.
And yet.
And you're waving your hand.
I do not.
I'm pushing back to your pushback, but what I like, I'm pushing back to your pushback to my pushback to your pushback. He's making the most disrespectful faces.
And I really liked Wall-E. I really liked Wall-E when it came out, and I've only grown to love it more.
David's making stinky poo-poo faces, and I want to jump over the desk and strangle him.
It's come on now. Nothing touches E.T. except for Mac and Me.
Comes close to touching it at times.
What do you think, Ben?
You won't even let me finish my fucking statement.
Well, every time you say it, I wrinkle my nose.
That's what I'm saying. He's making stinky poo-poo face.
I'm sorry, Griff. He's reaching.
Come closer. I'll reach.
He's reaching.
I'm fucking Dikembe Mutombo. I got the wingspan. Let me reach. The thing I like is this very subtle implication that, like, this guy's just a little different.
Yeah, he's a little different.
He's just made a little different. It's not overstated, and we don't get to see the personalities of the other ETs. But like you said, it's like
there's a Brooklyn
something
one.
in a light. Ed Burns.
Yeah, there's like one with glasses.
Let me phone home. I gotta call my mom.
There's a demolitions guy. He's got like soot all over his face. I'm just trying to think of like what the guys would be, what the ETs would be like. There's a gay one.
But I like that we don't.
It's the 80s, so it's a little broad.
Yeah, I'll let you do a take on what that one sounds like.
Fabulous.
Wow.
Oh, boy.
You go, girl.
Right, there's one girl one, obviously. Again, it's the 80s, so they're like, we can have one girl one and one kind of, you can pick, like, other minority.
One racially ambiguous one.
Slay queen. She ate. I put my whole e-tussie into that damn thing.
This is what people miss about this show.
They miss this?
I don't
Have
know.
we not been giving them this?
It's sort of Phantom podcast energy, right?
Sure.
Yes, E.T. Is gay. No, sorry, he's hanging out. He's hanging out. He's looking at the valley. He misses his flight.
Yeah, he just sort of gets caught up in a moment. The other ETs seem very like, okay, let's get in and get out. Let's get some samples,
let's
right?
be honest.
It's data collection.
E.T. is a bit of a messy bitch. Misses his flight home.
Yes.
Then crashes on a 10-year-old's couch.
Yeah.
Eats everything in his fridge.
Drinks beer.
Trashed in the daytime.
In the middle of the day. Yeah.
And then rips open all his toys and shit and makes like some weird DIY project and is like, let's go in the woods and fucking turn it on.
But beyond him being magical.
Like, relax, buddy.
Beyond him being magical, there's this quiet implication that, like, E.T. is a genius, but he can't get past the language barrier, right? And in the stuff like the ride and the books, they make it more canonically like,
get out of here with the ride.
E.T. is a botanist and fucking whatever. I know, I'm just saying, right? There is an admittedly problematic Robot Chicken sketch that is sort of like, if E.T. goes up to his planet, is he the fucking Forrest Gump of his planet? Right, is he the fuck up?
Enough. Let's stop invoking all these terrible things.
But
I do sometimes wonder if E.T.'s a child. Like,
it's a question.
Right, or like a young person on the crew or something. I don't know.
Adore
like the sort of Elfangor.
Yes.
To the, of the Andalites in Elfangor's the captain who dies and gives them their morphing power in Animorphs. Sure. And then there's Axe, right?
Uh-huh.
And they meet. He's the only survivor, and they meet him, and they have an Andalite. But he's like a teenager. He's like the baby,
Sure.
And that's kind of what E.T. might be. Maybe he's like
the Abensur of Animorphs. If I can just say some more words that are nonsense to 90% of our listeners. No, I just adore this movie's lack of definitive answers in all the things we're talking about. Right. I love that you're just like, maybe he's a child, or maybe he's an elder, maybe he's a genius, or maybe he's a fuck up, Yeah. Like, so much of it is about like the struggle to form a line of communication, but just barely.
E.T. phone home.
E.T.'s
what a
lost.
guy. Anyway,
he
so
misses
he's
his
lost,
flight.
and he goes to the shed of young Elliot and pretends to be a goblin.
Right. And you have this, like, you don't really see E.T. even sort of clearly until 15 minutes in. The first 10 minutes are largely this kind of, like, E.T. being left and Elliot, like, fighting to get just a fucking crumb of attention from his older brother and the friends, and them all just kind of, like, overlapping dialogue, cutting him out.
Yeah.
And then he slowly discovers this thing.
Yeah. Discovers him with the Reese's Pieces.
The flashlight.
Have you guys ever
eaten Reese's Pieces? Yes.
Yeah, I've eaten Reese's Pieces.
Yeah, they roll.
I guess I don't think my mom ever had a mercury thermometer. So I guess I never did the specific holding it to the bulb.
Yeah.
I did run it under the tap once and it kind of backfired. And maybe this has happened to you guys too, to pretend to be sick, because then I had like a temperature of like 103. Like it's like, it's too hot too fast. And then my mom was like, whoa, what is going on with you?
I feel like we had a like plastic thermometer with a metal tip that was the sensor, and I would put it under my armpit.
Armpit thermometer was a thing when we were kids, for sure.
Okay.
For annoying kids who couldn't keep it in their mouth, especially.
Right. Well, that was part of it for me, but I guess that wasn't me trying to trick.
But did you guys ever pull
warmer.
The thermometer trick?
Trying to.
Yes.
You also might be unsurprised to hear that I got sick so often I didn't need to pull tricks. I was basically out 1 out of every 5 days.
Yeah, you just had to say I feel sick, and your mom was like, "Sure, you do."
Right. Wednesday was like Gray Griffin Day, where I was like lying there on the floor.
So Elliot stays home from school and meets E.T.
Fakes it because he wants to really lock in with E.T. He shows E.T. his Star Wars action figures.
It's maybe the best. No, I have to stop saying maybe the best moment in the movie, but it's so accurate.
Yep.
This 10-year-old meets E.T. and he's like, all right, so this is Lando Calrissian.
And here, look, by the way, here's how Spielberg constructed this, right? He's like, let's put a bunch of cool shit in this room. And let Henry Thomas do whatever he wants.
He arguably has too many toys. You're kind of like, this is a middle child. How does he have this cooler room with this many toys?
A lot of them are probably inheritance from Michael, whatever. But it is, he was just like, show him whatever you'd be most proud to show him. Look around this room. Describe in your own terms.
There is divorce kid energy too, I guess, of like if your parents are divorced, often both parents then kind of will buy toys to try and get your affection and like
and it's part of him being the middle kid of like Michael's like sort of old enough to be like angry about this, right? Gertie is a little too young to fully process what's going on. Elliot would just be pure emotions about this thing. I also love that it's like this is a snapshot of a moment before Lucas goes in and is like, we have to come up with like Wikipedia names for all these characters.
Right. So he's just Hammerhead.
They're all Hammerhead, Walrus Man. Like there's no fucking Ponda Baba, Momon, Nidon shit here. He's just listing the toy names.
Real shit.
And then Lando. He loves Lando.
They save the best for last. This is Lando Calrissian. This
Kid's got good taste.
It just feels so authentic. Of like, how can a kid explain like humanity?
Yes.
Right.
And it's just like using like the toys and the things and the objects that represent our culture.
Now he would be like, here's my favorite Twitch streamer.
Yeah. Here's my favorite Fortnite skin.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
He's asking E.T. to gift him some V-Bucks.
Shows E.T.
I also
We're
think
in California.
There's an element.
Yes, go ahead.
No, and you have the Yoda moment later, right? Which is then accompanied by John Williams quoting his own score, which is a little too cute, but I think works. But I also think there's an aspect of Spielberg almost being like proud and in awe of his friend, where he's like, look, realistically, this kid would be obsessed with Star Wars. And it's cool that my friend made something that undeniably culturally pervasive that it's not even me just putting in an Easter egg.
Sure, no, it totally, of course. These kids are right at the age, where
that Hammerhead means something to an 8-year-old. I think it's something Spielberg is like, that's cool that George did it.
Let's just be honest. Griffin just loves that the kid loves toys.
I do like that he's got a pretty good fig collection. This kid brings home 6 figures a month, if you know what I'm saying.
I don't like
that's me recirculating a fucking meme structure that's really big on like fucking action figure photography Instagram.
This could have been a big episode.
It is a big episode. Remember when I said he put his whole E-Tussy into it?
That was good.
Yeah. Put it on the fucking Mount Rushmore.
Damn it. See, I already had cut that out.
No, it's back in.
It's back. We're going to keep calling it back.
Keep it in and double it.
I put my whole E-Tussy into that damn thing.
No bits.
Yeah, so another moment that really, in a sort of heartrending way feels accurate to me is they're like, all right, he shows Michael E.T., okay. And then they're like, all right, let's show it to Gertie. But they have to like threaten her toy with mutilation to kind of get her in line. It just breaks my heart watching that happen. Like, not in like this like tragic way.
It's honest.
But just in a like, it's honest. It's how a kid like that operates. Like, obviously my kid cares most about her toys, right? These like, like
Matrix Bear.
She does love Matrix Bear.
Okay.
He's usually Daddy Bear, I will say.
Well, because Matrix is daddy.
I guess so. And then Gertie gets it just like them. Like the way Gertie gets it, the way they all get it with E.T.
But also,
of like, this is our friend, it's not going to hurt us, and the adults can't know about it.
But the concept's a little too big
Shake.
for Gertie, so they have to introduce some stakes to get her to lock in and pay attention to what they're trying to impart upon her. It's also just such a perfect, like, I feel like, historic Spielberg piece of direction is the whip pan from the sort of serene, emotionally like locked in, sensitive moment between Michael and Elliot and E.T. all connecting.
Right.
Whip pan to Gertie like kicking the door open.
Yeah. Gertie
right?
rocks.
Then like whip pan to E.T.'s reaction. Gertie's scream and E.T.'s neck extending and screaming back in response, and them just needing to like muzzle her. But I the Michael thing, I think it is like what you're saying about like Michael doesn't engage with Elliot because Elliot's annoying, right? At the beginning when he's being dismissive of him.
Just whiny and like,
And he's a teenager. He's in that phase.
With his fucking teen friends. He doesn't want his dumb younger brother to be like playing D&D 2. He's playing D&D.
It goes a little into my read of what this movie is ultimately about, which I'll get to. But that like Michael seeing that Elliot has connected to E.T. and there's a sort of like emotional intelligence now to what he's presenting to him, sort of with a new sense of like maturity, just totally recalibrates Michael immediately, right? Like for the rest of the movie, Michael respects Elliot.
Right.
There's a part of him that has grown up the second he's connected to E.T.
I just also think that there's this bond of three of them are all like, we are in on this project together.
Yes.
Of like protecting E.T.
And the way that they get Gertie on board by saying that only kids can see E.T. is so
they have to turn it into a game for her.
And
but she does respond to that with "Give me a break."
Yeah,
like so. I do feel like she's kind of like, "I'm older than you."
Oh,
think
really?
She says, "Give me a break."
Oh, I don't know.
But she's playing this line all the time. I mean, there's sort of the stuff of her like saying too much to grown-ups when she shouldn't, and other times taking their responsibility very seriously. There's this aspect to Gertie of just like it's amazing that this performance does not become overly precocious, wise beyond her years kid, because she says things that are very much from a child's like perspective, but she says them with a level of confidence and authority, right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that the magic of the Drew Barrymore line deliveries in this?
I mean, I guess
there's
so.
Something that's a little bit like, hey, I wasn't born yesterday.
Look, Drew Barrymore turned out to be a really good actor.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things in retrospect I can be like, this is a great performance.
Yes.
You never know with these kid performances. Is it just kind of a magical, feat of directing? The right environment's being created for them. These are cute kids. They're being cute. Obviously with Elliot, with Henry Thomas, it's the emotions that come out of him are so raw that there is something kind of magic they're tapping into with that actor.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned out to be a good actor too.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, should I be nominating Drew Barrymore for Best Supporting Actress?
So.
I don't know. I do. I love her so much in this movie.
I mean, here's the argument in favor of it. As you said, she turned out to be a good actress, but this is a distinctly different performance than any other performance she gives in the rest of her entire career. Like, even the rest of Drew Barrymore, like Firestarter and fucking Cat's Eye are like not this.
Well, that's the thing. She starts doing this. Right, this kind of genre horror-y
and
route.
then her 90s like Poison Ivy, Batman Forever sort of shit is not this. And when she has her like late 90s
too fast or whatever.
When she has her late 90s locks into what becomes the Drew Barrymore movie star persona, which is the kind of like goofy flower child thing. That is not this.
Does that kind of start with Wedding Singer?
Wedding Singer
does Drew Barrymore become
Wedding Singer's the moment.
Because like before then, things like Scream or Boys on the Side, I feel like it's more like the kind of rebellious, wild child, young 20s Drew.
No, and her and Sandler talk about this, that she's like, I'm at an inflection point. I want to push back. Like, I want to put the wild child shit behind me. And she saw Sandler on SNL and saw Billy Madison and was like, me and that guy. That would help both of us.
It's fascinating to consider.
Was like, that turns me into something sort of like more Girl Next Door. And I think there's an emotional basis to him that I can pull out of him.
Her career is just so interesting in that, like things like in the early 90s, she's doing Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
and like 6 years later, 7 years later, she's doing Never Been Kissed, where the premise is like this like lovable girl next door who never like had a fun experience in her life and is a big dork. And you're like, it's Drew Barrymore.
Right.
Like, what do you mean? She's already been like crazy.
Wedding Singer like shifts that immediately.
Yeah, no,
And completely.
like, successfully.
And even the other stuff she does as a kid, like reconcilable differences or whatever, it's a little like her arms crossed being like, I'm going to stick it to my divorcing parents, is not the same energy as Gertie. Gertie's a very specific thing. Spielberg talks a lot about how he needed to like really form a relationship with these children and make this set feel like a family, to make these kids feel safe. And before this movie, he thought he never wanted to have children. I think largely because he was still working through the ways in which he felt like his parents fucked him up.
And he's becoming wildly successful and all this
and
stuff.
The other thing with Spielberg, the interesting dichotomy to him is like he is simultaneously someone who had to grow up way too fast and also didn't grow up, right? He's sort of like stuck at odds with himself. And it's just sort of like, I'm fucking living it up. I'm making movies. I'm playing with toys. I have money. Why do I need to like burden myself with a family? But he knows that he needs to create this kind of environment to make this movie. Drew Barrymore's the one he gets closest to. And the largest reason for that is that Drew Barrymore has like a chaotic, dysfunctional family. Totally. And the more she works on the movie, he's like, she has parents who don't pay attention to her, who are putting her in bad situations, unlike Henry Thomas, who like talks all the time about how good his parents were, especially after the success of this movie, of being like, we have to make sure you're a normal kid.
Yeah.
We are taking you out of Hollywood. We are not letting you work a ton. You're going to real schools, right? And it's just sort of like, I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did. I think he recognizes in Barrymore, like, this is at the brink of going really bad, which it did for a while, and it rebounded.
Yeah,
but he always stayed close with her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about like, my relationship with Steven Spielberg was the first time that I recognized what a parent should be like. And he talks about in that, he saw like, fuck, I think I do want to be a dad.
I know. He's like, that's the thing where I get a little bit like, Steve, I actually need to know less about you sometimes. Like, but yes, he says this is what convinced him he should be a parent. I guess more people should just go out there and make ET if they're feeling a little on the fence about bringing kids into the world. Just go make ET.
Just make one ET.
ET's real.
ET is real.
Gay ET is not real yet.
Mm-hmm. Gay T?
Gay T?
Gay T?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to come up with a better name for this.
No.
Gay ET is real if you believe hard enough.
Right. There is a bit
if all of our listeners clap their hands.
You know, obviously Peter Pan, you see Dee Wallace reading Peter Pan to Drew Barrymore at one point, and then when E.T. dies, spoiler alert.
Sure.
She's basically doing the Tinkerbell wish he could come back kind of thing from Peter Pan.
Yes.
Peter Pan's obviously just so influential and important for Spielberg, and like she feels like the most, you know, like Ben was saying about like only, you know, like I believe in E.T., you know, vibe from her, right? Like, you know, like she, like he is like a kind of magical fairy in her life.
There is this, you know, Spielberg framing this as a Disney movie to people in a way that made them worried, right? He is like iterating on a canon of like formative trauma childhood movies, right? These things that his generation, people who grew up before E.T. existed, talk about, of like Old Yeller having to be put down at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert. Or
I fucking hate that dumb fucking movie. My parents made me watch it.
Bambi's mom being shot at the beginning. These things that are like rites of passage for children that are like part of watching this is going to be tough and it's going to make you have to work through some shit.
It's so silly.
Spielberg is doing that, but he's also infusing it with this sort of like new Hollywood character study, performance-based, non-plotty. You know, he's like not going for melodrama. It is just this like perfect moment of like 10 different traditions of Hollywood all coming together at the same time, which I've talked about. That's part of Spielberg's development, is that he is this guy who is like forming a bridge between new and old Hollywood. But he's also doing that with the movie itself.
Old Yeller feels like this punishment that was inflicted on baby boomers that they then inflicted on millennials.
Yes.
That we are not inflicting. Old Yeller died.
Done.
Millennials were forced to watch Old Yeller by their poor scarred parent. Did you ever see Old Yeller?
No, actually.
But do you know what it's about?
That's why Ben turned out the most normal out of us.
You know, and like my parents made me watch it. And then, of course, at the end, there's young Yeller, not to spoil Old Yeller. But they're like, sure, we shot a dog. But don't worry, there's another dog, young Yeller.
Yeah.
And she was sort of walking out half happy. But I remember as a kid, I was like, that sucked. It's not like as a kid, I was like, can't wait to watch Old Yeller. Can we buy that on fucking VHS? And it's just great that we are just like
Done. Out of here.
We'll show our kids E.T., which is emotional and sad and then triumphant or whatever. But like, that's great. It's a great like arc and experience. Old Yeller is just like, yeah, don't let your dog get rabies or else your dad's going to shoot it with a shotgun.
Swing in with my take.
Yeah, fine. What is this fabled take? It better not be Wall-E is better than E.T.
I didn't say that.
I know.
Don't make your stinky poo-poo face. I'm not throwing this out as some revolutionary take, but as I keep hovering around it, I keep going back to like this core basic thing, right? Which I think above all else, E.T. is just about, in the abstract, having an experience that changes you forever.
Sure.
Right? And the way we're talking about the experience of like showing this movie to a child and forcing you to like think through your sense of the world and life and process emotions that you maybe haven't touched before and whatever.
Right.
Like that is what this movie is about to me more than anything. E.T.'s filling a void in the family structure. E.T. is like means of like emotional language for a kid who feels sensitive and overwhelmed by the world but doesn't know how to actually make sense of it. Like it's all these other things that are more specific. But I also think this movie is just about like experiences that change you irrevocably. Sure. And especially in your adolescence growing up, these things that are these like stepping stones of maturation.
It's experience that change you, but it's like because you have autonomy.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
You experience something.
Learning autonomy.
Yes, in a way that is like adults trusting you or you commanding some level of trust to like
they have a whole experience that they don't need adults for.
Exactly.
Like, it's like they are learning how to have experiences without, having their hands held.
Mm-hmm.
And that's,
making
what the adults realize.
Decisions. Right.
When the adults come in and bring all this bullshit with them, all the crazy tech.
Yeah.
It takes them forever to realize that the kids already know more about ET and figured out ET way better than they can.
Well, what's so touching about the Peter Coyote part is that he does get it, and yet he kind of can't help.
He can't quite. Right. He's empathetic.
He recognizes
his heart's in the right
what
place.
Has happened, and yet he cannot stop the wheels from spinning in his head of like, but this is an opportunity. There is a sort of like responsibility for us as a species to learn as much as we can from this.
But what I like about ET is none of that's being said. You just know it's true. You don't know who these guys are really or what they work for, what their ultimate goal is.
His whole framing of like, this is a gift. This is a very special gift, and I'm so happy he found you, and you unlocked him in this way.
He's actually really jealous.
But it's not like he's like, and we want to chop ET up to make like...
Elliot says that.
Fucking, growth hormones or whatever, right?
They do.
And it's not like we want to dissect him or any of this stuff. He's just sort of like, we need to learn more. And Elliot's like, this isn't about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
I like that he's not a capitalist. I like that it's not like E.T. is a threat, that he's only 5 degrees off from coming from completely the right place. But there is that adult part of it that he can't turn off.
I did have a thought where I was like, fuck, wait, is E.T. like the cure for everything and we just let him go?
That's the question.
You know what I mean?
What if we just chopped up E.T. and we're like, if you eat like one little bit of ET, you live forever.
I've heard of Blue Chew, but
or
ET
just
Chew?
Like cure for like, all of these horrible diseases.
Yeah.
But he's too cute. We gotta let him go.
You gotta let ET
You gotta
go.
let him go.
No, what what can these people teach us?
Yeah.
Like these healers, these scientists who are visiting us, but they're not visiting us and going like, you should not bomb. Like, they're just kind of like, we're just checking out some grass. Leave us alone.
So here's my other thing. I think that
here's his other thing.
E.T.
You
being
think that Wall-E, yes.
I'm so fucking angry at you.
David, is there a stink in the room?
This is like dumb animation bullshit and your Will Vinton disrespect all over again.
Who?
I shouldn't even be re-invoking this stuff. Now he's going to get more dismissive at
No, I won't do the Will Vinton bit. JD has to be here for that because JD is so good at like the ire of like, David, you haven't heard of, Yeah, right.
I think this movie being a divorce movie is overstated. I think that is a prism that is helpful for it tackling what it needs to tackle, which is this sense of core loneliness as a child, right? That is like getting to a level of awareness that you're starting to identify sadness, fear, anger, these emotions that are starting to make sense to you, but you can't quite put your hands around.
Right.
And when I'm talking about these experiences that change you, they are the things that happen in your maturation as a human being that do help crystallize those things for you, whether they're positive experiences or negative experiences. The divorce creates the structure for the void that E.T. can fill. But E.T. is not a father figure, you know?
I think E.T.'s something of a father figure.
But I also think in a certain way, Elliot's like a father
Yes,
to
he
E.T.
is.
What makes it
Absolutely.
interesting is it is not a one-to-one thing.
It is not.
It is a very complicated emotional thing.
That is true, but he is like an emotional being that Elliot relates to.
Yes.
And that is what he needs.
And someone who hears him and like sees him, and literally the conceit of this movie that is so great that you almost think on paper is that one step too far. They are emotionally bonded. They feel the same things. They feel the same pain. They feel the same joy. It is just that he knows someone else totally gets what he's going through, right? Like that is what is going on metaphorically. The sense of like complete understanding from another person at an age where you're just like, am I totally alone in feeling this way? And that is the greatest fear.
E.T., to continue the plot, Elliot stays home. They meet E.T., yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
He can levitate balls, like plasticine, or what do you call it in this country?
Sure.
Play-Doh.
He's got magic. He's making a solar system.
He's from over there.
He's trying to communicate that he needs to, in fact, go home.
He can heal.
Yes. He can make flowers grow pretty again.
He can grow a flower. He can heal Elliot's cut.
Mm-hmm.
The flower device.
It's
such
very
a
good. Simple
so
effect.
Brilliant.
Seed it there.
Yep.
Emotional payoff later.
Yep. I mean, yeah, the whole movie is that. Yeah.
And
there's just a lack of over-explaining.
Yes, exactly. The bond between them is communicated very simply. Elliot's getting some shit out of the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of shit, to be clear. He's really loading up.
Yeah.
E.T. opens an umbrella. It startles him. Elliot, startled, drops everything.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Yep.
They're kind of becoming the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have this wonderful scene that I remember as a kid I would always forget about because it's the weirdest scene in E.T. where E.T. starts ripping some Coors Lights. That scene's great. Nothing wrong with that. Throws on the quiet man, right? He's having a great time.
You forget this. I'm like, this is the scene for me where I'm like,
I think
this is the weirdness that transcends this movie for me, that it's not playing it safe, that it's like taking weird turns.
He's wearing a teddy bear's little pajamas.
Right. Well, they've tried to hide E.T. in the plush pile, which I love.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I love that he's found a little piece of clothing that fits him.
But it's also such a weird, like, old man sort of.
I know.
It's like a grandpa bathrobe.
It rules.
Just like let grandpa sit in the comfy chair and watch his old movies.
Yeah.
Right? Watch his stories or whatever.
Getting ripped.
But it's like Elliot knows that if he takes more than one day off from school, he's going to be pushing his luck. He has to go back to school. He trusts that E.T. now is comfortable enough in the home. He's not going to do anything wrong. But in fact, E.T. gets too comfortable.
Did you guys ever dissect a frog?
Yes.
It's so weird to me. Like I never did that. I think it's not really done quite as much anymore.
You know what's even
now seen
weirder?
as like super weird.
I want to say 3rd or 4th grade, we not only dissected a frog, I remember with even greater specificity, we dissected a sheep's eyeball.
I've heard of that. I
the
dissected,
teacher
I think,
took out like
once,
fucking,
like a sheep's kidney.
what do you call it? Like vacuum sealed
yeah, of course,
plastic bags that he had to cut open with scissors and just plop on the table and be like, here's an eyeball.
We did a heart. I don't remember what animal, but I remember that was really especially disgusting.
I have to imagine this is done, right? That any listener of this show who is like 20 is like, what the fuck are you guys talking about?
I don't know. I think so. But obviously it's such a brilliant choice for this because Elliot feels for the frogs, much like he feels for his little home frog friend. And obviously also Elliot is 3 sheets to the wind. So he frees all the frogs. And then kisses.
He's also drunk in the magic of movies, which
he's drunk on the magic of John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara.
It's a hero.
I love him. Obviously, having her stand on the kid who's lying down so that he can kiss her. It's great.
Henry Thomas talks about when he read the script. He's like, this rules. I get it. Alien, E.T. I love this guy. And he gets the kissing scene. And he's like, I don't know if I want to do this movie.
Of course.
Tells
if I was
parents,
10 also,
I don't want to do this movie. And is like, I don't like girls. This sucks. Not just like this is embarrassing to do. He's like, this seems revolting. I think they shot this first. It almost sounded like Spielberg said this was one of the only things that wasn't shot in continuity.
Sure.
Maybe to get him over the hump of the kissing thing, which he was so worried about.
Sure.
And Henry Thomas is like, as a little kid, was just like, I need to nail this in one so we can move on. And the beautiful thing of like the door, the wind sweeping open, the kid on the floor, him stepping on him so that he can kiss Erica Olenek from Baywatch. That's who
sure.
it is.
Is that who it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that Henry Thomas like attacked it the first time and their like teeth clinked.
Classic.
Like she was
Classic
not
bad
ready.
kiss.
Their like teeth hit.
Yeah.
And then Spielberg's like cut and he's like, great. So print, moving on. And he's like, Henry, that looked insane. And Henry Thomas had to be like coaxed into doing 3 more takes until it looked right.
Well, it's great.
And Drunk E.T. is the funniest shit in the world.
Drunk E.T. is funny.
This is what I'm saying of him owning, like, okay, what of the E.T. performance works the least? The walking looks goofy. So let's try to limit the walk to scenes where E.T. should look a little funny. It's funny when he's in a Halloween costume. It's funny when he's drunk. You don't really do the walk around E.T. that much other than those moments because you can tell outside of the spaceship getting off and getting on, he knows like, let's like limit how much we do this. Because this is when you stop taking E.T. seriously as an emotional character.
Now, there's not much plot.
This is what I'm saying. Like 5
left.
things happen in this movie. There is a long section that is just like everyone getting to know E.T. Then he communicates this one idea. I need to phone home, right?
Yeah.
They make this sort of plan quietly. You don't see them
little
really
tech
doing it.
thing.
It's
you
the
know.
Buck Rogers comic strip.
Right. He sees
Yes.
the satellite dish. He kind of gets it from that.
But he's got a record player. He's got like a saw blade. He's got a fork. He's got an umbrella.
What's the
It
speak and
rules.
spell?
Thank
Yes.
you.
Spell.
Yeah.
Yes. But basically it is like it just happens in between scenes that he has constructed this thing that they're all going to use Halloween as the cover because that's the night where parents let you go out and aren't too worried
they
about
dress E.T. up as a ghost.
Yes.
It's a great bit, like you say.
you. Gertie
Funny.
is like, trusted with this secret which she can't hold, so she keeps on wanting to tell the grown-ups, but they keep on being like, Gertie and her imagination.
Right.
What is this weird thing, her new bit?
Gertie
Like it's
also,
her talking about being
not
in a
to
punk
invoke
band.
another Pixar movie, but looks like Jessie when she's dressed as a cowgirl. She's got the little red hat.
She does.
She's so cute.
She does.
She's such a cutie pie.
Doesn't she make a joke about like this isn't my real costume?
There's a whole thing where
Right.
she's like,
They're gonna let her change the costume.
I'm a
later.
cowboy pretending to be a ghost or whatever.
Right.
She's so
she
funny.
wants to
What
be a
fucking-
ghost, right?
she-
But it's so they can give ET the
She
whatever.
should have won the Mark Twain Prize that year.
She's so fucking funny in this movie.
I know we're pushing
Alligators in the sewer.
Just a couple of things. After he gets in trouble for letting the frogs go free,
Mhm.
there's apparently a deleted scene where Harrison
Correct.
Ford
Yes.
played the principal.
You can see it.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube or whatever.
It is
You
not
don't
a-
see Harrison Ford, like it's a cameo where he's kind of in shadow, much like all adults.
But even still, he was like distracting to the audience.
Right.
They could just tell.
it would just,
and
that
also,
to me feels
it
just
feels-
so weird and
Yes.
unnecessary.
it kind of feels like, again, the less adults, the better.
That's the thing. It's kind of breaking the adult rule. It's more than you even want. The amount of like the teacher you hear in that dissection scene is like as much as you can deal with.
Right.
You know?
And then I just love too when the mom gets the call about Elliot getting in trouble at school.
Mhm.
That ET is just kind of like Pink Panthering,
Yeah.
like behind her, and she just never sees
It's-
him. I
it
just
is-
love that little moment. It's
It is
so
crazy.
fun.
I mean, first of all, I love you using Pink Panthering as a verb, but also it is one of those sequences where you're like, this is a difficult balancing act, Steven. I don't know if I'm going to buy this, that she somehow keeps just not noticing him. And it is to the credit of both her as an actor and the like puppeteering of ET that without it being too cute, they keep on just sort of selling that it's just like she would just barely miss him.
Yeah.
She's a little too caught up in like running down the things in her head,
But she like puts the coffee can down, but she's like, so chaotic and stressed out as a single
Yes.
mom that she doesn't really like clock
That's
that
the
like
master
it's gone
stroke,
missing.
right? That what they use is not her being oblivious. It's that she's just sort of in like, oh, fuck, what else do I have to do, mom mode?
Yeah.
But it is perfectly timed in stage where you never feel like it's breaking reality. Where I'm like, come on, she would have seen him now.
Yeah.
They
Halloween.
have their Halloween thing. It is kind of a funny Mandela effect thing to a degree, and I'd say a lot of it is because of the Amblin logo, that the classic image of Elliot and E.T. riding in front of the moon is often transmuted with the end with the other
bike
kids
sequence, yes.
during the daylight with the red hoodie.
Yeah.
Whereas when he flies with E.T. in front of the moon, he's dressed up as a fucking ghoul.
He is. He's a ghoul.
He's in the gray sweatshirt with the spooky face.
That's like that?
That's the first time the flight theme hits, right? Let's talk about John Williams for a second.
Called Flying.
Because he talks about the secondary motif of the film, which is the what sounds, I would argue, very similar to the AI score. The very gentle, kind of sad, lonely piano music that doesn't hit sweeping until the bike for the first time.
Why has been marking delete on that? I don't understand. What's
Can
he
you
doing
imagine
with
what
his
it would
computer?
feel like to hear that for the first time?
Someone layer me doing that over the beautiful Alan Davia footage.
I always thought there was no way to improve upon ET, and perhaps we have stumbled upon it.
Dun, dun, dun. You know, I saw, this is jumping ahead to the end of ET, but it's relating to John Williams.
Sure.
I saw Wicked in theaters. One of the first
you
films.
loved it.
Yeah, Wicked rocks. One of the first films I saw in theaters after
see what
my
I'm
kids were
doing?
born. You doing a stinky poo poo face, but that's fine because Wicked
It's
isn't that good. One reason I liked Wicked is that Wicked makes the correct choice that very few movies make, which is that the final seconds of Wicked are someone going bum 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 bum, and then it goes to black, and then you fucking explode with happiness, which E.T. also does.
Sure. I'd say Wicked, though, is ending at a cliffhanger, which this is not. And we'll get to the fucking ending, but the ending is...
There's a cliffhanger in E.T. Where's he going? Where's that bitch going?
Yeah, but
it's kind of the same ending, actually. They're both flying off.
It's a cliffhanger that Spielberg is pot committed to never resolving versus
you don't know
Wicked
that,
being like, come back in a year.
Gay E.T. 2026.
Oh, can I pitch the tagline?
Yeah.
For Gay E.T.?
The extra-terrestrial.
Oh,
okay, come on.
What? Your phone is ringing. Universal Pictures on the line? We're canceling Wicked 2. We don't need it with this solid gold.
We're reinstating DEI.
But just for Gay E.T. Even Trump agrees.
Gay E.T. is healing the nation.
God. Oh, boy.
He flies in front of the moon. It's very brief.
It's beautiful.
In both cases, though, it lasts it's a much shorter stretch of time than you think of, where I'm like, I almost expand it in my head into being this like triumphant 2 minutes of flying. But in both cases, it's very small. They just do like one arc into their landing spot in the woods. E.T. sets up his device.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm balling.
Which is a cool device.
By the way, I just want to say,
So,
I am at this point really. It's the movie has just destroyed me. I'm really like
this movie
affected.
just hits something magical. There is a story Spielberg told in one of these fucking things I watched about the first assembly cut they put together, right? And the movie was
where it was the David Sims score before Johnny come in.
There was no score.
Right.
Williams didn't even have a theme to hum him.
Yeah.
And it was 4 hours long.
And bad.
Spielberg watched it, and his response was, I never in my life thought I would make a movie this good. And the way he recounts it is not a like, holy shit, Steve, you nailed it.
Right.
He is like, things came together on this that even when I am watching a version of this that is twice as long as it should be, without music, without finished, without final effects and all of that sort of shit, he's just like, this is a miracle. This just fucking worked. The core emotion of this worked. And people talk about, like, filmmakers are always like, that first assembly edit is the worst feeling you will ever have in your life.
Because it's nowhere near where
you
it's
put
going
it
to be.
together and
right.
you're like, this is a disaster. My career is ruined. And he just could kind of see, like, this just something, we hit on something here. And it's only going to get better from here. And he even said, like, I don't know if it's going to make any money. This feels very personal to me, but this exceeds all my expectations of what I ever aspired to do as a filmmaker. And then every step of the way, you fucking tighten that cut. You add the Williams. He does one test screening to Universal where he was just like, I so badly just want this to be my weird little film. I just want them to not touch it.
Right.
And they screened it.
You can have one test screening, but I don't want to.
The audience response was so ecstatic that they were like, We don't know if this is going to make money, but this thing undeniably works with anyone who sees it. We're good. We get it. We're excited that we have a good movie to sell. We're behind it. And they just like, no notes, didn't touch it. But everyone goes through this whole fucking process being like, this might be a movie for 10 people. We hope we make back our budget. I think to them, they were like, he looks weird. It's an odd pitch for a film.
It's cheesy. It stars a bunch of kids.
Is this sort of like open emotionality a little bit dead after
penis
like...
breath is kind of a weirdly specific thing to say.
Yeah.
Lose a lot of people right there.
Yeah.
It's weird that the score is a guy going, dan, dan, dan. Anyway.
I just love this balance of everyone being like, I think we're onto something here. And also, I don't know if anyone else is going to like it.
Well, they did like it, but we'll get to that. So E.T. flies in front of the moon. Mm-hmm. Just to Ben's crying point. I always cry at one point in E.T. And then I will also cry at other points that sort of move around, right? Like there'll be things that get me every time. I always cry when the bikes take off the second time. You know,
sure.
Like when that is the most triumphant emotional moment in American Hollywood, you know, mainstream cinema.
Here's a thought I had very, very similar to what you just said last night while watching it. I'm like, the last 15 minutes of this movie are the pinnacle of Hollywood as an idea.
It is.
I'm like, this is the entire notion of America being like, movies are an industry. We're going to make a dream factory. We're going to put too much money and hire a lot of craftspeople to try to make these like transcendent emotional experiences that travel across the world and across decades. And I just watch this and I'm like, it's this inflection point where he's getting like the best of old Hollywood, like artificial emotional magic with a sort of like more focused emotional realism and just like the best people all at the top of their game, delivering perfectly, speaking things that you could not put into words.
At least until Jack Black showed up in the Minecraft trailer.
Yes.
That was
Steve.
It's yeah, it's Steve. I think Nick, our old researcher, Nick Loriano, had a Letterboxd review. Let me find it. That was essentially.
I'll tell you what my review was.
It was very good, and I invite you to read it out to us now.
G.M. Let me try that again.
Go for it. You can do it. You can do it.
G.M. The good movie.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
What do you guys think, Ben?
5 stars.
What do you think of that?
I give it a perfect Uber ride.
Yeah, I give it 5 stars.
Yeah,
good job.
Yeah, I think this thing's unimpeachable.
I do too. But
what was Nick's review?
I'm trying to find it. God, how many friends of mine on Letterboxd have fucking watched E.T.?
Right.
I guess it's a popular movie.
It's weird. It's almost like everyone has seen
From
E.T.
1975 to 1982, Steven Spielberg had a more powerful connection with the audience than anyone before or since.
Yep.
And of all the films in that miracle run, this is the most wondrous. He is correct about the being in sync with what people are feeling and thinking.
Here's what I find really fascinating.
Boring old, you know, sort of like Jimmy Carter America or whatever, you know, like the late 70s, early 80s America.
Here's what I find fascinating about that. Much like our previous miniseries subject, David Lynch, weirdly, I think Spielberg and Lynch are both artists who primarily try to work through their subconscious, right? Spielberg talks about the fact that he's like never really done therapy in his life, that he will watch his movies 20 years later and be like, I guess this was that trying to get expressed out of my system. But that he doesn't didactically work through it before he tries to figure out how to transmute it into a film, right? And like people have that same sort of like, I can't speak to why Mulholland Drive made such an emotional impact on me. But those are elusive movies, right? That are not trying to hand you clean sort of like emotional arcs and story beats that can carry you through. Spielberg has like that aspect of being able to like just pull some emotion out of his system that he can't even put into words and create the right delivery system for it and also like entertain. That is just insane. And it's, as you said, in that run of years, it's just like he fucking knew how to say stuff to audiences.
He did.
And it's not like he lost that, but he became more complicated in what he wanted to try to say. And this is sort of like the pinnacle for me of all of it.
Right.
Yeah.
After Halloween, it's sort of interesting. It's
so Elliot basically needs to go home because E.T.'s device is taking too long and his mom's going to be worried.
Yeah,
right?
Elliot goes home.
Yeah.
The device is cool because it does feel like it could work
Yeah.
a little bit.
You just buy it enough.
Like I
It
think the
just makes
best
sense.
component is
The fork.
that he makes
of course, you would say that. You're married to a goddamn fork.
that he makes a bespoke like record player.
Scratchy. But yes, what happens?
I love that it's like messy and like discombobulated, you know, where I'm like, oh, it's like the umbrella's over here and the wires are running here. It's not like a clean, tight little like flick a switch and it goes on.
But it's wind powered.
Yes.
It's just so cool.
So
Michael goes back the
this is where
next
it
day
all
to try to
cracks open.
find
Yeah, but this is where it
E.T..
all cracks open. Now the mom is worried. Where was Henry?
Right.
I mean, sorry, where was Elliot?
Elliot.
You know, and then of course E.T. doesn't come back. Michael finds him by the culvert. You know, he's becoming gray E.T.
Yes.
He's all fucked up.
This begins.
I guess the idea is he's just sort of exposed to the elements. It's also just Elliot's in turmoil. I don't know.
Yeah, and also
it's never again really explained like why E.T. starts to. They sort of seed it with like he's starting to look sick. They say that earlier. It's like maybe he just can't be here
it's
for
too much
long.
time away from his ecosystem.
Because
he's eating fucking Reese's only.
He isn't on the best diet. And it's
and
like
course and drinking course.
Yeah. Does E.T. come back to life?
Factor. Yeah.
You know, because of the love of the children around him? Yes.
So maybe some Warby Parkers and
but
an
he
Aura
also
frame.
he comes back to life because his people come back, right? Like
Yeah.
that's sort of
Yes.
how I take it. Like it's like they are part of
Well,
whatever
it
sustains
is not
him.
to once again jump
don't
to
know.
the end, but it is part of what is so devastating about like E.T. being like come and Elliot saying stay. That they're both like, why don't you come to my world, right? And they're like, we can't. This could only ever last a week.
Yeah.
We
It's-
have to split up.
They gotta split up.
Right.
Which I would go.
Yeah, of course you would. You'd fucking Roy Neary so fast.
Yeah.
But that's like, this is the part of it that even though he hasn't had kids yet, he's doing this direct rebuke to Close Encounters, right? And this is what makes it such an interesting counterpoint movie to me, is like, in speaking of these sort of like unresolved things, right? And like filling these like emotional holes from your childhood, and Spielberg like making movies that speak to his loneliness without really successfully working through them. The shift in, what is it, 5 years between Close Encounters and E.T. is like, Close Encounters is him still making a movie as a kid who ran away, joined the circus, and won.
Right.
And part of that is the pursuit of like, I made it out of my childhood home. I'm away from all the sadness and the anger. I've made it to Hollywood. I'm making movies. And great.
Yeah.
I got on the ship, and now that's what I was searching for. There was some siren call pulling me out of my home away to something greater that will answer everything for me. And I think he has grown up enough in the 5 years between these two movies that he's now speaking to a thing that I think a lot of people who experience massive success early on in their careers have to face, which is you get everything you think you wanted, and then one day you sit down and you go, fuck, I'm still not happy. That wasn't the thing.
Yeah,
I
you
kept
push
on
against the door,
projecting.
you open it.
Right. And that causes some people to spiral out of control, and other people have to start then doing the hard work. And E.T. is the inverse of Close Encounters, which is you are home and the things come to you and you have to work through them. You can't run away. Right? You can't just go on the ship, enter the magical city of light,
you're not
and
gonna
have it
Close
all be
Encounters
perfect. Right.
You know, the Andalite ship
Mhm.
that Elfangor and Aximili
Of course.
hang out on
Mhm.
is all
And
grass.
the Animorphs book series, just to remind everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all grass because,
Uh-huh.
you know, Andalites eat through their feet.
Okay.
I always like that.
Yeah. I bet you did.
They don't have mouths.
Look what I'm doing.
Dan? The Animorphs are way too powerful and cool for you to be doing stinky poo faces.
You're fucking kidding me?
Animorphs are pretty cool.
I hate that he doesn't get upset when I do it to him, and when he does it to me, it fucking hits right in the
I don't
heart.
know what to tell you. I learned as a teenager to stop getting upset about people like not agreeing with me, because I would get so upset. Like, right, you know what I mean? Like that thing where you're like showing your friend a movie and then they don't like it, and I would take it, and I just built this armor of like, I cannot let it get to me, because then I'll just be upset all the time, right? And I think it is kind of why I became a critic, because I was just kind of like, I can just sort of feel what I feel about a movie, and it'll be okay if not everyone agrees with me, right? You know, like you won't have that kind of chip on your shoulder.
I want to pin
Correct
this
me if
thought.
I'm
I want
wrong.
to pin this thought. I'm going to come back to this.
Sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The Brits are kind of known for their emotional detachment.
And also for being sarcastic about everything anyone ever said.
Yeah.
So there's maybe
Right.
that
Any
and the soup.
feeling that anyone has, they're
Just
a bit
saying.
like,
What's all this
jerks. Except for then, obviously, if you watch like whatever, an episode of Porridge, and they're like, and you're like, you got a lot going on in there.
What's
huh?
Porridge about?
It's a prison sitcom. I always think of Porridge.
That was not going to be my guess.
The whole thing with Porridge. You move to Britain.
I was
right?
guessing it was a fucking sitcom about making dinner every night.
Exactly.
It's a prison sitcom?
That's the thing. You move to
Because
Britain.
they feed them porridge? Is that the
Yes,
idea?
yeah.
Okay.
But you move to Britain, and you learn like, oh right, they have their whole own pop culture history, right? That I don't know anything.
You moved to
about.
Britain, as one does, as we of course
as
know.
I had to,
Right.
And to me, the
One of those rites of
fundamentally
passage in every young
the
man's
British, the most British ass thing I ever learned.
Mm-hmm.
Was they were like, oh, we have all our great sitcoms, like It Ain't Half Hot Mom and LOLO. And you're like, Jesus Christ, this is cartoon shit. And they're like, and Porridge. And you're like, stop right there. I'm sorry. What is Porridge?
Yeah.
Like, and they're like, what do you mean? It's a really funny sitcom. What's it about? This guy who's in prison. How the weirdest sense of humor on these people.
How often would they make, please, sir, can I have some more jokes on Porridge? That just feels like a fucking layup. If the show's called Porridge and it's prisoners and they're asking for more gruel, right?
Probably made it once.
You think they only made it once? Well, they're probably only 4
I will
episodes.
say, it is. I believe there are 20 episodes. I think it's a 3-season
so that
show.
ran for 30 years.
100%. It
Just
is
stealing the
not
fucking
to-
Simpsons joke,
not
but
to-
it's funny every time.
Yes. I believe Porridge, I think, is a major, major influence on The Office. Like, that is one of the classic, like,
Oh,
Gervais
sure.
and Merchant touchstones of, like, you can make a sitcom about, like, a sort of mundane, sad thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, Porridge.
They bring Gray E.T. home.
Poor Gray E.T. He's
Elliot
all gray.
Both feels bad because he's connected to E.T.
Yes.
in terms of physical health, and also the worry of, like, what is this? Why can't I fix this?
But
right? And then Dee Wallace comes home, and for the first time, she has to engage with E.T., and it's such a beautifully played moment of them being like, Mom, they're so worried that they're going to let her in on this. And they're like, Mom, we need to show you something. And she sees E.T., and her first response is like, oh, that's great. How did you do this? Right? She immediately responds to it like it's a fun art project they did. And they don't say anything to correct her. And Dee Wallace just plays the realization very quickly of like, wait a second, fuck, this is a living organism on the floor of my kitchen that is dying.
Very fun stuff, very normal. It is so terrifying. I mean, as a kid, the most terrifying image of ET is the spacemen arriving, right?
The spacemen breaking through the windows.
The window, like the way they come through, the great Spielberg, visual construction of like they're at every door. And then even the window, they're coming through the windows.
It's like zombie movie
As
shit.
a kid, it is so terrifying.
Yes. And he said it was one of the ways in which the shooting consequentially
really
helped, because it's like when one day they show up to set and the house has now been like ruined with all this fucking plastic.
Right.
It was upsetting. It was an invasion. They had spent 30 straight days with this home feeling safe.
And it's amazing, like the way it's just in the snap of a finger suddenly, it's turned into like this lab, this quarantined lab. Like, how does that happen so fast? But you're like, of course it does.
She's like, this is my home, but it doesn't matter.
No,
She
of course
can't
not.
protect it.
In their defense,
She can't
there
protect
is
them.
a fucking alien in her house.
Gray ass alien.
And she's probably like, what am I, fucking plumbing insurance? Like, it's a fucking alien, man.
I love that as like a result of this movie having a budget cap on it, trying to keep itself on rails, right? And this ET animatronic puppet being so complicated that you're like, they couldn't build 2 of them. So for this sequence, they clearly just cake ET with gray makeup.
Yeah.
Like there's something about the effect where you're like, oh, they didn't make a second sick ET puppet. You can tell that they've just layered something on top of the hero puppet and then washed it off later. There's something kind of weirdly more upsetting about him just kind of being dusted with powdered sugar.
It's so unsettling the way he looks, even though ET always looks fucked up.
But also they've so
he kind of
successfully
needs a gay ET to kind of zhuzh him up, if you're asking me. Get him to the salon, get a facial.
they've kind of so successfully
Ted
built
could
up
teach him how to cook.
the
Here's how you make an
pulsating
omelet.
interlife of ET that just like limiting the motion a little bit becomes like, oh my God, what the fuck is wrong with ET?
It's just funny that on Queer Eye, one guy is like, I'm going to change your house and make it look amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And another guy is like, so this is how you make an omelet. You put eggs in a pan. It's like, it's a little imbalanced.
David, beyond that one guy's like a culture expert, and that his thing is just sort of like, here's an album you might like. I'm going to send you a Spotify playlist.
My joke about the culture guy, and I know on the new one, the culture guy is a little.
His name's Karama.
Yeah, he's my favorite.
My wife watches it, and I don't.
I haven't watched it in years,
over
but I
shoulder.
think Karama's a real one.
She really likes the culture guy.
Yeah,
I just remember Jay in the original one, which I watched.
Right,
and
he was
loved.
the silly one.
And like literally would just kind of be like, make sure to shake someone's hand when you meet them. And it's kind of like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
The other one's, this guy's tearing down walls in this guy's home. And you're like, you should really like sign emails with Best.
And like
it's
Ted
cool.
Allen has like a good brain
Ted
for
is
food.
The best.
Yeah, that guy rules. But
Ted
that Jay was
is
sort of
the
like,
best.
I recommend talking to people. And you're like, what?
Good, thanks, Jay.
You're not even
really queer of you.
You're not even like recommending activities. You're not telling me plays to go see.
I just love I know the original one would have the heartstringy moments a little bit, but it was kind of more just like, put some pants on, you're a mess.
Yeah.
And the new one is always like
the most uplifting.
Oh God, it's so emotional by the end. It's always some hugely tragic
I was into
story.
it for the first 2 seasons because I was like, this is surprising that like Queer Eye can actually get to me. By season 3, I was like, guys, we're pushing it. I'm out. This is too much.
Yeah. It's so well made.
Sure.
I sympathize with it as Anyway.
I mean, the ultimate lesson of the newer Queer Eye is like, you know how you can fix someone's problem? Just throw a bunch of money at it.
Money.
Get you a new house. And here's how you make an omelet, as I was saying.
Well, of course. And there's that.
Yes.
Learning how to make an omelet.
It's just funny that in 1 week you can change someone's house, but you cannot teach someone to cook in 1 week. So fundamentally, you can probably just teach them to make risotto.
These spacemen seemingly changed the house in like 2 hours.
Yeah. They wrapped the whole fucking house in plastic.
They transform everything. They set up their fucking labs. And it is part of what makes this section so upsetting. And I feel like this is when children start to cry and like convulse, right? And I feel like I've told this story before, but I went to see this Park on the Lawn screening of E.T. with my then girlfriend and Derek Simon, my oldest and best friend, often invoked, and his now wife, I want to say. And we were sitting on a fucking towel next to young parents who had maybe a 3-year-old. And this section starts. E.T. is gray. Elliot's on a bed next to him. They're both sick. They're reaching out to each other. The girl just starts losing it. And the father just very calmly says to her, don't worry, this is what happens to everyone when they watch this movie.
Right.
And he said it with the right tone that actually consoled her, of being like, you don't have to be scared. What you're feeling right now is normal.
Yeah.
This is shared. And it was just like, it has stuck with me, the profundity of watching that happen to strangers next to me and knowing that this movie just exists on that fucking like spectrum. But it is that thing of like, the spacemen are scary. It is scary that not only E.T. is dying, but so is Elliot. It is so much more intense than you expect this movie to get. Right? In terms of the threat, which is still kind of abstract. As you said, we don't really know what their designs are for E.T. I don't think they're ill-intentioned, but you just see like this movie is within spitting distance of becoming like horribly traumatic.
It's very traumatic. It's very traumatic to watch Elliot suffer. And I do feel like that is the thing they're most worried about in a way.
Yeah.
There is a compassion to even the medical stuff where it's scary.
I think E.T. dying would make children upset, but Elliot also at risk of dying, and it being the sort of like they're feeling each other's pain is what pushes it over the edge to being a profound, like, formative experience for children.
But, Elliot, E.T. like disconnects from Elliot consciously, clearly, to kind of
try to save
heal him.
Yeah.
Which works. That's when Peter Coyote comes in. It's where we see his face, all that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And E.T. dies and is dead for a good 15 minutes. It's not just a sort of like, he's dead, he's back kind of thing. Like, it's a long thing.
15, it feels longer than it is.
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
Because it's like, E.T., it's the whole E.T. on the table. Let's try this, let's shock him, right? Which is so visceral, especially when you're a kid.
Oh my God, the moment that is just a true reaction where Drew Barrymore says she didn't know what a defibrillator was. So when they're taking it out, and this was a big thing, Spielberg was like, hire real doctors. The main doctor was his GP, or his internalist, I think he said.
Sure.
And he was just like, when you give actors medical dialogue, you can tell that they're trying to remember the jargon on the page.
Of course.
Right?
I mean, it's unavoidable.
And especially with this, where it's like you want to believe in the reality of actual doctors operating on a fucking alien. He was like, don't get actors. Get real doctors. Have them go through the routine of what they would really do. And so he just kind of let them run with that.
Right.
And they take out the defibrillators. Drew Barrymore doesn't know what that is. She doesn't know what it's going to do.
It's scary.
And when you have that reaction shot where the shock goes through and she like shudders, she like jumps, that is just like a real captured moment.
It looks like it's about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated.
Although it's even E.T.'s revival, of course, is slightly drawn out.
Yeah.
They put him in the fridge thingy. Elliot talks to him. It's so genuine and lovely.
The flower.
And then he walks by, he doesn't see the light. Then he sees the flower.
Yes.
He's like, double take on the flower. I'm just like, Spielberg really takes his time with it. He's really playing you,
and then he somehow so quickly backs into an incredibly funny sequence of Elliot now needing to cover the fact that E.T. has come back to life.
Cry.
Right. To now play sad.
He's so good, though.
Which I do
His
think like
face.
helps children get through the rest of the movie. Like the movie needs a 10-minute respite from emotional devastation.
And then it revs up into the fun of the car chase, the tube,
the
disconnecting
kids are
the tube.
empowered. They're getting away with this on their own. But it's like
Barb isn't there, though. That would really make it feel powerful.
There are some stranger things happening in this movie. Let's admit it.
But
they plan the Great Escape. Yeah.
And I love that their ability to get away because they can maneuver on bicycles.
Right. And they
the
know
adults,
the neighborhood.
They know the neighborhood, but the adults, even with all of their power and resources, are like completely proven.
Well,
like
in the defense of the adults, they didn't know the bikes could fly.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the whole magic of it is like they're doing it, they're getting away, and then they're cutting through these developments that aren't even built yet, right? Which is really cool. Like the sort of, and they're sneaking all around, and you're sitting so long, and you're with it, and then
Delta
you're like,
City.
they're fucked. They're going down the hill, and you're like, no, like they've got the blockade, and they've got the guns.
Well, that's the thing, too.
Which is so scary.
We talked about earlier in the episode when she literally says, like, their kids, no guns.
Yeah.
I really think that is a powerful part of the story.
And I think it is part of the core cowardice of replacing it with walkie-talkies, where Spielberg in 2002 was like, is this a little too intense? And by 2003 was like, what the fuck am I talking about? Because the positioning is so specific where it's like, you see them with guns, and then once the kids come into range, they are not aiming at the kids. When the kids fly overhead, the guns are basically being held out of the way.
No, they're not aiming at the kids, but it's terrifying that they have guns.
It's terrifying that they have them, but the adults have the wherewithal to be like, I can't fucking shoot a kid, right? There is a sense of intensity that also doesn't feel like a threat of real harm, but it's the appropriate raising of stakes.
And I'm biased because I had a run-in where I was quite young, trespassing, and got in trouble with the cops, but had a very scary moment that I don't want to get into.
Sure.
And I just feel like their instinct is to have guns, is to protect themselves.
In this stupid country.
That's what's scary, is that that's the immediate instinct. Right?
Like the guy has a shotgun.
But this is the other thing about this movie. The bubble of E.T. is so contained that you're like, these aren't the spacemen. These are the local authorities, right? They don't really understand what's going on. That there's so little ripple effect of anyone who has any interaction with E.T. up until this point that I think part of them having the guns cocked and loaded but not even aiming them anywhere at the kids is just like, what is this that's been called in? 5 kids on a bicycle with a weird, like, bundle of blankets in the basket? And then so quickly, when the adults turn, it's like the bikes start flying. And it's such a great heightening up of just like, the first bike ride moment, despite it giving us the iconic image, is so brief, is a small distance, basically just insulates what would be a crash off the cliff, right? You don't have the confidence that E.T. will be able to lift 5 bikes.
True. No, I mean, it gets me every time. I just start sobbing.
And he does the fucking eyes, like basically editing truck in, right? Mm-hmm. He cuts 3 times to closer and closer shots of Elliot. Elliot's worried that he's not going to fucking do it. There's the question of if it's E.T. too weak to pull off the fucking shit again. And then just the E.T. close-up in the basket.
He's wearing the little blanket over his head.
He looks like a little babushka.
Can I say it?
God.
What?
Is this the greatest blankie movie of all time?
Well, people already, I think, are floating.
People are saying it on
Reddit.
the Reddit. I'm stealing it from the Reddit.
Very good stuff.
And then they fly and you cry.
Oh, yeah.
I cry.
Oh, yeah.
For sure, too.
It is, you can tell, watching it academically, right? Studying it intensely. You can see in the lead up to the sequence the shots where it is clearly an adult stunt double doing the bike riding in Elliot's sweatshirt.
Yeah.
And you can see in the kids flying the shots where it is clearly little stop motion puppets. There is not like an invisibility of the effect. And yet the emotion...
I'm going to tell you, the impact is
this is what I'm saying.
Me. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm watching it trying to break it down and I recognize the techniques, but that's me like putting my fucking no fun goggles on.
Yeah, no fun.
Because it is so perfectly constructed that you don't question any of it.
When
they did the re-release in IMAX a couple years ago, I think it was 2022, I went to see it with our friends Jordan Fish and Ray Tintori, and I believe I texted you right afterwards, and I said, here's a take. Is E.T. the greatest example of an already great film that is somehow improved most exponentially by the score?
I mean, maybe.
You can think of movies that are like mediocre and the score makes it like a 7.
Da, 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 da.
So the first...
You like that part?
Yeah.
The first use of the flying theme is the first time he flies. The second time is when he comes back to life under observation.
Sure.
Right? They do a quieter version of it. And then this is when it really repels up. This is one 15-minute track. On the soundtrack, I think it has 3 slashes in its title. Because this is basically 15 minutes of unbroken music that cover the entire final section, right? It is titled, Escape / Chase / Saying Goodbye. Mm-hmm. It is everything from them leaving the home to the end credits, to black. And then end credits is its own theme. Williams said it was a very complicated piece because it responds so directly to so many moments, has to sync up to specific images and beats, right? It has to go through all these different moments of like expression. And it's 15 sustained minutes, which is just an endurance test for all the musicians. And this is peak full orchestra, like a fucking 1,000 violins and the drums and everything. And they tried scoring it a couple times and it kept on being off. And they're doing it to picture. They have the movie locked in a cut that Spielberg likes. And Williams kept being like, it's a little off. We're not hitting all the beats. I don't want to have to stitch it together in post. Let's try it again. And Spielberg says, let's turn the screen off. Just play it for 15 minutes.
Sure.
You folks just feel it. Don't worry about the image. Play the piece as John has written in the most emotionally connected way you can, and I will re-edit the movie around it. Because Spielberg in that moment was like, this shit is fucking gold. And I don't want a worse version of the Williams track just because it fits my edit. It's easier for me to futz the fucking edit based on their timing.
Good for him.
And he was like, it was the only sort of editing pass he did at that point was just to adjust that a little bit. And he was like, and he did. He had to do like 5 little shiftings of things. It gave him a couple new ideas. But basically, he was like, just give this to me as if it's a fixed piece of classical music. And I will now edit to it as if it is a pre-existing track. And it is just astonishing. There is, you have everyone getting to the ship in the woods, right? Everyone coming together at this moment, realizing they're going to have to say goodbye to E.T. This dialogue that is incredible that I will get to in a moment.
Okay.
But like the score is swelling and building up to him walking up the ramp, right? The door irising in on him, and then it gets quiet. And you're like, oh, right. Well, the score hit the absolute peak of what it could do, and now it's going down to a settled mode. And yet, when the ship starts taking off, Williams ramps it up again, and within 60 seconds gets it bigger than it was 60 seconds earlier when you thought it had hit its peak. And it just feels like it keeps on transcending and hitting a new plateau as he's just like getting so much mileage out of these fucking close-ups that are every actor having a different but incredibly specific personal response to it.
Dun, 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 dun. I want to point out a problem in the Wikipedia.
Okay, do it.
It says that E.T. places his glowing finger on Elliot's heart and tells him he'll always be there. No, he doesn't. Puts it on his head.
Yeah, it puts it on his head.
Come on now, Wikipedia. Not heart. It would be lame if it was heart, because E.T. doesn't know about human concepts of like, oh, your heart is kind of like, a metaphor for our emotion. He's like, no, I'm going, you'll remember me.
Heart. Sure.
Like,
right.
Yeah, he does.
I'll be right here.
Baby.
Good ass baby. Here are the two things in the score that get me the most.
Okay.
Very hyper specific things.
Okay.
One is at the start of the bike chase when the strings just start going fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh my God, they're getting away with it. And the second is just the bum, 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 bum of the finale.
Wicked. That's what I was just saying.
Yes.
I said that.
Yes.
The timpani.
Yes.
That's why Wicked rocks.
Should we
It's
get
so
timpanis
good.
for The Office?
Yes. We should have every episode. Bum, 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 bum. Every time. So good. Yes. I mean, I love it. I love the ending. I love the triumph of it. I think, it's not quite the Titanic level of you send everyone out happy in a sad movie, because E.T. isn't a sad movie.
Yeah.
E.T.'s a melancholy movie, whereas sort of, you cry at the end. But I do think you just exit with a pep in your step because of the music.
Well,
Jesus, timpanis are expensive.
Oh, yeah. Those things, they're expensive. How much do they cost?
Well,
looks like you get like $40 timpani at Walmart or whatever.
Just one is $5,000.
Yeah, but they're big.
Shit.
We would only need one, to be clear. We don't need two.
No, yes, we don't.
What
we
are you
don't need
looking
a
up,
whole
Graham?
set.
give me a second.
What? I'm giving you a second?
Yeah.
Okay. What are you doing?
I'm just looking at as it is written in the script, okay? And this must feel like goofy shit to write and takes a lot of confidence to be like, no, this is exactly what it should be. E.T. come. Elliot stay. E.T. ouch. Elliot ouch.
Sure.
I'll be right here.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
I mean, that's like masterful
But
shit that defies
the
all
way
logic.
they talk throughout the movie is so beautiful.
Yes.
Where they're just kind of echoing each other and you're just feeling their connect. It's beautiful.
But the dialogue in this movie never like explains the themes.
Yes, that's
it
why
never
it's good.
underlies them. Yeah.
There's one time when Michael kind of just says it explicitly.
Uh-huh.
Like Elliot feels like, it does to the adults or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's fine because you need him to tell
You need
the
someone to
adults.
tell them.
But
yeah.
you almost wish he didn't have to. Like,
But also the divorce movie part of this, I think the father is directly invoked 2 times, right? There is the like, well, you should call your father about this. And he says like, what, she's in Mexico with Cindy or whatever?
yeah, and the mom is really upset because,
Right.
and then comes
And-
back to the table and says he hates Mexico.
And Gertie says, what's Mexico?
Gertie says, "What's Mexico?" But Michael, again, Robert McNaughton, the most underrated performance
It's
in this
really good
movie,
in this.
is really affected because
Yes.
he's the most mature.
He
And
gets
he
it now.
says to
Yeah.
Elliot, like, can't you think about anyone else for a second?
Right.
Like you don't say that in front of her.
And then
'cause
there's
it's just going to upset
the
her.
one later moment where they sort of bemoan the end of the experiences that they used to have specifically with their father, going to the ball games, or popcorn or whatever.
Yeah, that moment I don't like because again, it's just like it was like, hey, remember when Dad would go buy us popcorn? Where I'm like, do we need to say that? We know you miss your dad, but it's
also-
fine.
It's
fine.
literally only twice in the entire
It's
movie.
only twice. So it's a good movie that ends well.
Well, hold on. I want to say this.
What do you want to say?
These final shots, the faces, right?
Mm.
Like Dee Wallace is kind of like overcome with emotion, but is sort of laughing. The boys, like Michael and his gang are all kind of like looking up in awe. There is this like, whoa, this is cool. Gertie is kind of just like completely emotionally overwhelmed in a way that feels like, what if you told a 4-year-old their pet died,
Mhm.
You're like emotionally beside yourself, but also can't really intellectually process it. Elliot is like borderline stoic. His eyes are full of tears. He's making these adjustments in his face, but he is like, not clenched jaw, but this final shot, what just kind of knocks me out and is the thing that every single time makes me cry as the drums are going, is that this final shot is Henry Thomas in real time over 20 seconds starting to process, right? Like that's what's on there. Everyone else has like a clearer emotional response to what's going on. And Elliot is looking up and just being like, okay.
Right. Sure.
So this is my life now.
Yeah.
This is who I am. This is what has happened to me and what happens next. And it is what Spielberg said always stopped him when he was trying to come up with fucking sequel ideas is like, what could I possibly say that is more impactful than ending on the note of Elliot not knowing how he moves past this? Not as like a core trauma that he'll never get over, but you do go like, if you've had this experience for a week of your life, then what the fuck is your life like as an adult after this?
Right. Well, what
I don't
happens
think he's
is,
cursed.
of course, we don't see it, but it's safe to assume that the government shows up, arrests the entire family, locks them up for the rest of their lives.
It's possible
There's
that
that
happens.
terrible fucking commercial that Lance Accord directed with Henry Thomas that I hate and I think is sacrilegious.
Yes.
Where it's like he comes back and Elliot's like, thank God I've been waiting for you. And it's so fucking maudlin and bullshit. But I think part of what like the difference between Wicked, which is like, well, we know this is half a story and we know where the story is going and whatever. The like lack of answers at the end of E.T., I agree with you that the ending is so emotionally triumphant. You do walk out feeling something, but it's not a clean ending.
I'm not comparing the ending of E.T. and Wicked in any way except they had timpani.
You earlier said, but Wicked ends with a sense of a cliffhanger and E.T. doesn't. And you said E.T. is unresolved, but I'm like, staying in the unresolved portion is the point.
I'm just saying more movies should end with fucking triumphant orchestral music because movies are good.
Yes,
People
agree.
should just end with like, what's a really dumb movie? What's like a really dumb movie?
Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah.
Exactly. Should end with bum, 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 bum.
Okay, but what about Dumb and Dumber 2?
Bum, bum, bum. Gay E.T. Bum, 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 bum. Which, by the way, obviously should be the...
Here's what I think more movies should do.
What?
Have 5 ETs, each who represent a different area of self-improvement, culture, food.
Yes, that's true.
Interior
Right,
design.
Right.
Style.
Queer...
Grooming?
Queer... yeah. Anyway, E.T. premieres as the closing film of the Cannes Film Festival.
Yes.
So I would say that suggests at this point, like you're saying, Universal knows they got something. But they're not just putting it out. Like,
their thing is, as I repeat, their thing is we show this movie to audiences and it fucking works. The response is undeniable. The question is if we can get people to go. How do we convince them to leave their home and take a chance on it when the movie's being sold as a tiny bit of a mystery box?
Sure. I mean, this is all a little bit... These documentaries also just like, oh, the deck was stacked against me, Steven Spielberg.
It wasn't stacked against it, but he was just saying, like, you know, Jaws, Close Encounter, whatever. Like, Raiders, he was like, this shit's gonna fucking work.
Mm-hmm.
And he does say that the Cannes screening was the greatest emotional response he has ever had.
Standing O. Everyone freaks out. Francois Truffaut sends him a telegram that says, you belong here more than me. Just a line from Close Encounters, which he says will never be equaled.
Yeah.
It opened in theaters in June 11th, 1982, and it made $359 million, which was the most money a movie had made at that point, domestic.
Yes.
Obviously not adjusted for inflation or whatever, but
it basically holds that record until 1997.
Until Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park beats it.
Doesn't Jurassic Park beat it worldwide but not domestic? I know we cover this.
No.
We cover this in the Jurassic episode. We'll get to it, but I think that's what happened. And then I believe domestically E.T. is only dethroned by the Star Wars re-release, adding on to the grand total of Star Wars in 1997. That's what I believe to be the truth.
I don't know. I guess maybe it's a worldwide thing. I have no idea. But Jurassic Park is listed as
you folks will hear it
beating
settled in the Jurassic Park episode.
And it's a hit. It does break through a sort of kid movie ceiling that was seen to exist or whatever, and and all that. It's nominated for 9 Oscars. It wins for Gandhi, wins Best Picture and Best Director,
rude,
and Best Actor.
Rude.
Well, that was
E.T. wasn't even nominated
for acting.
Correct.
No,
and he gives a beautiful, sensitive performance in this film.
He does. And They made a wonderful video game for the Atari, of course, that had no problems with it whatsoever.
You know the Atari video game thing, right, Ben?
You must know that, Ben.
Oh, the really shitty game.
Where they made way too much of it because they were like, everyone's going to buy it. It was like the worst game of all time.
It sucks. It's basically unplayable. They dug a big hole and buried all the games there. It's helped lead to the destruction of the environment. It kind of is the beginning of the end for Atari.
Yeah, it's beyond the beginning of the end for Atari. It's right. It's the coda for Atari.
But they stake everything on, like, people are going to want to play E.T. No matter what, we slap E.T. on a cartridge and people will buy it. And instead it, like, destabilizes the entire planet.
And I think they, like, made one guy like program it in like such a short amount of time.
They had no time. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a perfect, dare I say it, boondoggle.
They improve on it in every way with the Xfinity commercial. That's a better film than
E.T. touching work.
Right, and they're going to improve again on it with Gay E.T., which is essentially E.T. 3.
Right, our
when you think
film,
of the
which, by
Xfinity.
the way, trademark, registered copyright.
Yeah, exactly. Call me.
Yeah.
Obviously, right, there is this book, The Green Planet or whatever, that's this kind of sequel novelization where Spielberg's like, let's leave it
E.T.'s
there.
professor. He's a good character.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he now?
PTR has really reclaimed him as one of their own.
Oh, I'm glad.
And then made merch of Botanicus, who's the stoner version of Botanicus.
I would say with E.T., okay, the ride is great. You guys like the ride. But generally with E.T., it does seem like any attempts to do more E.T. were almost a folly. The game, the sequel ideas, the remastering, the 20th anniversary edition. Just leave E.T. be. Spielberg has been wise enough to do that.
Yes. And he did an interview recently where he said he was scared in the wake of its success because he actually didn't have the contractual power to stop them from making it. But he had to implore them. And he
had such growing clout that he could, obviously.
And he said,
Whereas with Jaws, he didn't have that power. They make a bunch of shitty sequels. Although people got so mad at me for saying they were shitty, and I got so many texts from people being Jaws 2 is good.
Everyone cares about the Jaws.
I mean, this is very recent.
Yes.
This is like
he just did an event 2 days ago
talking about
with Drew Barrymore at the 92nd Street Y, which was a surprise event. It was supposed to be Meryl Streep doing Out of Africa.
Sounds like a snooze.
As part of a
that I think is
TCM 92nd
well, I think
Street
also
Y
Out of
crossover?
Africa it's the 40th anniversary, 40th anniversary.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they just subbed in
she
Spielberg.
Couldn't travel because of, I think, the California fires.
Sure.
And they announced at the last second, we're so sorry, Meryl Streep can't make it. We're replacing your event with an E.T. screening with Steven Spielberg and Drew Barrymore, which is maybe the greatest plus-up of all time.
A bit of an upgrade.
But he said, and I heard him told other versions of the story, the interesting thing about watching the fucking Blu-rays for this movie is every 5 or 10 years they do another anniversary edition of this film. So there's all this legacy special feature shit that's him commenting on it from 10th anniversary, 15th, 20th, 25th, 30th, right? You see the same stories evolve with more and more distance. But he said basically that they were could we please get a sequel? He earnestly tried. He developed some of the Green Planet stuff. And then he goes back to them and he was like, guys, nothing I'm going to give you is better than that.
No.
There's no ending better than what we just had. I really think we should have the confidence to step away and go, we made a perfect movie. And he was like, I respected that they...
Yeah,
they accepted.
They knew that. Yes.
Yeah.
He is about to enter a bit of a funny period.
Yeah.
With Twilight Zone, Temple of Doom, Color Purple Empire, The Sun, Last Crusade, Always Hook. It's his softest, underbelly kind of period.
It is an awkward transitional period that doesn't produce bad movies, but produces weird movies, and certainly films that have weird responses after E.T. is such a fucking undeniable triumph in all
to
areas.
The point that he's like you too. I think of Spielberg as like you too in so many ways of when he's making Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, he's like, I'm auditioning for my comeback in a way. And it's but you're still famous. And it's yeah, but nonetheless, I kind of need to prove myself in this weird way.
Well, we said in the 1941
I'd just like
episode.
to bring up you two for Ben.
Okay, yeah, sure. In the 1941 episode, we say that movie feels like Spielberg having the yips from how much success he's already experienced and trying to fuck up on purpose so he can break his own streak that would become a burden for him were it to last longer sustained, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like he's doing that in the post-ET run, but it does feel like he's this is the best version of this movie I'm ever going to make. I can't keep doing versions of this. I have to morph. I have to evolve. I have to try other stuff. I have to branch out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My God,
and yet
weird. I just got an album downloaded on my phone.
It's funny to think that we are a year away from another Spielberg alien movie?
Yeah,
which
that's
will
true.
now be his first in 20 years.
First and War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
Are we saying like he hasn't made anything alien-y since then, right?
No. And Coleman Domingo gave an interview, and they were like, "What can you say about it?" And he said like 6 things that would apply to E.T.
It's true. He's overselling me. I'm worried. I'm so hyped now. And Coleman Domingo, I feel like, is such a sort of,
The Greatest Showman.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That I'm worried he's getting me too hyped, but I'm very hyped for whatever that is.
I'm excited in the way of like, I kind of trust that Spielberg would not make another alien movie unless he really had a reason. That there's something new he wants to do or say from a different perspective.
E.T. opens number 1 at the box office, June 11th, 1982, Griffin. Number 2 at the box office is another science fiction film, a sequel.
It's a sequel. Is
a
it
great film?
Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan?
That's right.
How many weeks had it been out?
2.
Okay.
Came out the week before.
So it had 1 week.
But
I feel
obviously
like
that movie's a big hit.
this summer is a little notorious for a lot of high-profile flops where other studios were just like, E.T. was a fucking buzzsaw. It like sucked up all the oxygen.
Huh. I mean, Wrath of Khan obviously is a big hit.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what's coming.
Like Tron comes out this
Firefox,
summer and does okay.
Blade Runner,
Yeah.
The Thing.
Yes.
Tron is probably a good example. Yeah, I'm looking through. I'm going ahead.
And a lot of those movies are darker, more mature,
but they're also
more clinical
genre movies that are. It's just kind of people clearly are like, well, I could also just see E.T. again.
Right.
You know,
people are just like chasing the dragon of E.T. and being like, you know what? If I buy a ticket to E.T., the end is going to make me feel like $1 trillion again.
Beastmaster.
Sure.
Number 3
Good
at the
movie.
box office is a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
We did a box office game for a future episode recently that was like sort of 6 weeks in advance of this one. And this sequel was in that box office.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, and this
it's
is an episode we recorded yesterday.
Mhm.
I'm already forgetting. It's kind of crazy how quickly I do the complete brain dump the second we finish the record.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal that you don't remember this. It's a big sequel.
We do a lot of episodes. It's a big sequel in 1982.
Yep.
And
it's a 3.
Not a Trek. It's a 3.
Mm-hmm.
And give me the genre again.
Mr. T is in this film.
Oh, it's Rocky 3.
Yeah.
The genre is movie
Mr.
with
T.
Mr. T in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
He pities the fool.
He does. He does, in fact.
He has.
Yeah.
Well, or is Mr. T in Rocky 2? No, he's in Rocky 3.
He's in Rocky 3.
Yeah.
Clubber Lang. Rocky 2 is
Rocky.
Apollo Creed again.
Yeah. And Rocky 3 is Clubber Lang. But Thunderlips is
Thunderlips
also
in Rocky 3. They're both in Rocky 3.
Rocky 3 rocks. Great movie.
Yeah.
Not as good as...
It Rockies.
Well, maybe it is as good as the other sequels. I don't know. They're all kind of good, except for 5, which is
it's a little
kind of
light on robot wives.
bad. Sure. Number 4 at the box office
Talking
is...
about the most cowardly shit of all time, when Stallone did his recut of Rocky 4 and was like, I took out the robot. And I'm like, that's the best thing you ever did, was having Paulie basically fall in love with a robot.
That is true. That is a great thing that happens in Rocky 4, a film that is 42 minutes long and nonetheless has a room for that plot.
Yes.
No, and it's like mostly montages and then like, 2 big fights and a robot.
The implication that Paulie fucks the robot, that they give him a robot who's like, he'll help you around the house. Then the robot starts acting like a 50s housewife. And then Paulie starts implying that he puts his dick in the robot.
Well, you know what? You got to put it somewhere, Paulie, I guess. I don't know. Number 4 at the box office
That's
is...
a classic David Sims, The Atlantic
Let's
quote.
move on. Number 4 at the box office is a film that came out 1 week before that is produced by Steven Spielberg and is kind of being undercut by being released against E.T.
But this is
Toby
my point.
Hooper's
Michael
Poltergeist.
Kahn had to cut one or the other.
Sure.
Yeah.
I still think that's MGM fucking up releasing Poltergeist then. But Poltergeist was obviously
Poltergeist
a
was a
solid
hit.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
well.
not an ET-sized hit.
No, but you know what is an ET-sized hit? Less than 20 movies in history?
Sure. Number...
If you adjust for inflation, it's like 5? Yeah, anyway, I don't know. Go on. Sorry.
Number 5 at the box office is a sequel. Opening new this week, a legendary bomb. And a classic, why on earth would you make a sequel to that movie? And then, of course, when you learn what the sequel is, you're like, well, why would you do that?
Well, it's not The Sting 2.
No, but it's kind of like that.
It's not Butch Cassidy and the Sun. No, that was a TV movie.
That's a TV movie.
But it's kind of like that. It's a sequel with a bad take. It's not French
it doesn't
Connection
have a bad
2.
take. It's just like none of the stars from the old movie are in it. You know,
so it's
like,
Sting 2-y in that way.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Huh. None of the stars are in it. When was the original from?
The original from 1978.
Okay.
It's got a great actress in it, making one of her first, giving one of her first performances.
It's not a Jaws sequel.
No,
it's not. Is it King Kong Lives?
No.
That was a good guess though. Linda
Sure.
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got a great actress giving one of her first performances
She sings a great song.
in 1982. She sings a great song in the movie Stinks.
Grease 2.
Correct. Michelle Pfeiffer.
Ben,
I want a cool rider.
Good job on that.
Thank you.
Cool Rider.
But now
Cool Rider's
people
a great
love
song.
Grease 2. It's been reclaimed.
Yeah, but it's a piece of shit. But Cool
Damn
Rider
it!
rocks. What?
Super Yaki's gonna fucking come for your head.
Oh boy. Number 6 at the box office is a film that I'm guessing is not a dark drama, but I have to look it up because I actually don't know what it is. Oh wait, I do know what it is. Of course, it is Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner in
Hanky Panky?
Hanky Panky.
Great title.
But it would be funny if that was like, I'm like, what's Hanky Panky about? It's like, oh, it's about the Holocaust. Oh, Jesus.
David.
No, it's about it's sort of like I've never seen it. It's like a sort of jokey mystery movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Is
Yeah.
it any good?
It's okay.
It sounds like it's bad.
It's fine.
Number 7 at the box office is Porky's,
Sure.
the Canadian softcore comedy that swept the nation. And
Talk
made,
about having to put your dick somewhere. Was it the...
It's so weird that
Yeah.
they put their dicks through the holes in the wall.
It is.
I guess they're stupid, horny teenagers, but it's like
simply
you're
would
looking
not
through
do
the
it.
exactly.
And I
Like,
never
what do you think's
have.
going to happen.
And yet, unfortunately, created a weird genre of pornography.
Yeah. What happens? Some mean lady yanks it, right? Isn't that the bit
Yes.
that they're like, oh, the hot girls in the shower will do something nice, and then like a fucking lunch lady comes in and is like, school marm or whatever.
Porky's made 109 domestic. It was crazy.
Was it the number 2 or 3 movie
It was
of its year?
right up there. I'm not sure
Yes.
where it was, but
It's this is what I love in these like 70s, 80s years where like the modern blockbuster and films hitting these kinds of crazy numbers are first forming. Is you'll be like the number 1 movie of the year is Star Wars and the number 2 movie of the year is Smokey and the Bandit. You know, there's like a huge gulf between the two.
I'm trying to make a joke where it's like it's aged like uranium, like it's like so radioactive.
Yeah.
I don't really know
There
how
are
to do
3
it.
of them. They made a trilogy.
It's crazy. It's so disgusting.
Yeah.
Number 8 at the box office is a film.
Anyway, we'll do those on Patreon.
I think I've seen all 3.
I've seen none.
Porky's is bad, and then Porky's 2 is really bad, and then Porky's Revenge is like it's not even fun. Like
Porky's 2 is the next day.
yes,
And Porky's Revenge is the titular Porky getting back at these kids.
Yeah, the
and
sort of mean sheriffy guy. Or
Okay,
whatever.
I thought he was like a land baron.
He's like a
He's a
bar
bar
owner.
owner.
I don't
Okay.
know what the fuck he is.
He's like a boss.
Porky's.
hoggy
I feel like
yeah.
Porky's Revenge doesn't even have like nudity. It's just mostly like plot. And you're like,
I'm like,
the
what
fuck?
are these movies about? It's a mean bar owner and some kids putting their dicks in places.
Kind of. It's like a sex comedy. It's
Yeah.
in high school or whatever. Sorry. Number 8 is Sword and the Sorcerer.
Oh, sure.
The sort of Albert Pin.
That was a big flop.
Yes, huge flop.
Yeah.
Fantasy movie. Number 9 is Visiting Hours, not the Ed Sheeran song. No.
Uh-huh.
The 1982 psychological slasher film
Okay.
starring William Shatner, Lee Grant, Michael Ironside.
Good lineup.
Sounds pretty cool. It was
Yeah.
a feminist journalist who's the target of a serial killer. Sounds cool.
Who directed this picture?
Of course, Jean-Claude Lord.
Jean-Claude
The
Lord.
Canadian Jean-Claude Lord.
Okay.
And number 10 at the box office is Conan the Barbarian.
John Milius.
Great movie.
Spielberg's old buddy.
Yeah. So that's E.T. for you guys.
Yeah, I think
It's
it
good.
rules. He's one of my best friends. I'm trying to
Mhm.
think if there are any other points I want to make. What were the other pins I placed in, Ben? Did we keep track of the pins? I think I got to all the pins. I think I
you
pulled the
got
pins off the board.
Yeah, no, I think you got to all the pins.
Yeah. But no, I think this film is kind of unparalleled for what it is doing.
Yeah.
And
E.T.'s
it's and
good.
it's just like undeniable, unwavering, eternal power at
Yeah.
what it gets.
It feels like you could watch it 200 years from now
Yeah.
and it still would have resonance.
Yeah.
I hope so.
He's a great guy.
Yep. Bye.
Don't say bye.
See you later.
That's not how the show
Sorry,
ends.
no. The theme
not-
song's playing,
No.
outro, we have
Well,
timpanis. Sorry,
we had
Griff, that's
minutes
the
before
end.
the drums hit.
No, sorry.
Yes. Thank you all for listening. Tune in next week for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
That's
In this
right.
economy?
Or is it?
Am I wrong?
Tune in next week for our Blankies episode with Joseph Cinematrix Reed.
Wow, reading Rango himself. And in 2 weeks, tune in for Temple of Doom with our friend Olivia Craighead.
Yes. Right. But next week is the Blankies, where we will discuss the best films of the year, the Oscars, and all that.
Maybe I decide to just nominate E.T. in a bunch of categories for 2024.
The real challenge is, will Griffin watch Emilia Perez before the Blankies episode?
I will. I've said this. My concern is I'm worried I'm going to like it.
If you like it, you like it.
I know.
Some people like it.
I know. I'm just a little scared that I'm kind of... The big swing nature of it, the messiness of it, is going to endear me to it to some degree. But also I might hate it. We'll see. I will watch it. I will absolutely watch it before the Oscars.
You're going to be mixed to negative, but I'm not sure.
But I talked to Green Book. I only watched like 2 days before the ceremony when I was like, okay, time to just fucking get this over with. And I guess I will probably do the same with Emilia Perez.
Green Book's watchable, though.
Green Book, this is the thing that's insidious about Green Book. It is very watchable.
Emilia Perez is not. I find Emilia Perez a real slog.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You know what isn't a slog?
Green Book.
E.T.
E.T.
Phone home. Ben?
Coming up on our Patreon Blank Check special features, we are kicking off our Star Trek commentary series where we will be covering the Picard era.
Yes.
The Trek films.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek Generations.
Look to the stars.
Is posting in a few days on our Patreon.
A weird movie.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
It's got its pluses and minuses.
It certainly has its pluses and minuses. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as always, gay ET is camp.
That's right.
Just to settle the debate. I need to pee so bad.
Okay. I'll keep talking to Ben.
No, don't.
Why not? It's fun.
No, we'll just pause.
No, E.T.'s real. Come on, let's talk about it. Let's just talk about how E.T.'s real.
I mean, I would love to hug E.T.
Are you like how Diego Luna's always like, I want to touch Jabba, like in interviews? Do you know about this? The actor Diego Luna, who plays Andor.
Yes.
So Andor, I don't think ever, shares any space on screen with Jabba.
Right.
But on the press tours, Diego Luna's like, I would love to touch him. Like, the texture seems so interesting.
It kind of seems gross, though.
I know, but not to Diego Luna.
He seems sticky and stinky.
He wants to touch Jabba. Just let me touch. He said it many, many times, and I hope someone has finally let him touch Jabba. Peter Coyote, one of the founders of the Diggers, Ben. The Diggers, like these sort of famous Haight-Ashbury, street theater guys, left wing anarchist types. So that's cool. Don't you think? He's still alive, Peter Coyote. There he is. He's a cool guy. Just looking him up. I don't know why I'm still talking.